Chapter 1. At the beginning of the world, all living things were born. The vast history was like a tsunami or a landslide, sweeping through endless time. Humans lived for a lifetime, plants and trees had an autumn. From birth to dusk until they turned into bones, this was the fate of mortals. In ancient times there were emperors who suffered from illness. In order to not die, they prayed to the heavens in search of immortality, but in the end, they could only be buried in the soil. Birth, old age, illness, and death were the sorrows of mortals. No one could break this iron law. Heartbreak Mountain was a towering mountain. It was one of the 8 great mystical mountains in the world and was located in the Xia country. The mountain was steep and as smooth as a wall. There were no birds or beasts. If a mortal wanted to climb to the top of the mountain, it would be a fantasy. From this, it could be seen that the mountain was extremely dangerous. At the top of Heartbreak Mountain, the northern wind was biting cold. Yixian looked down at the vast sea of clouds. His eyes were filled with endless loneliness and vicissitudes. It was as if nothing could cause him to feel the slightest bit of emotion. Time flies. 4 years have passed. Do you still remember me? Or did you already think that I was buried in the soil? Yixian had a huge secret. He was originally a patient with late-stage leukemia and should have been a dead man. 4 years ago, he left the bustling city and came to Heartbreak Mountain. He wanted to end his life, but the heavens gave him a chance. They opened a sealed door for him, allowing him to live until now. No, not only did he survive, Yixian had gained some things and lost some things in the past 4 years. What he gained was power, but what he lost was perhaps the compassion he once had. All living things in the world have to die. Today, Yixian has broken out of his cocoon and transformed into a butterfly. I shall step into the world again. Rumble. Like raging waves, like rocks piercing through the sky. When Yixian's voice sounded, thunder streaked across the sky. Thousands of lightning bolts crisscrossed in the clouds. The roars of thousands of beasts could be heard from the depths of Heartbreak Mountain, as if they were witnessing Yixian's vow. Wind and clouds gathered as thunder filled the sky. Yixian took a step forward, causing endless waves to appear in the void. He turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the top of Heartbreak Mountain. The cold wind whistled and the snow was heavy. It was winter in the 12th lunar month. Pedestrians were in 2s and 3s, and there were few vehicles on the road. However, a lonely figure was moving forward in the snow. Jiangnan City, People's First Affiliated Hospital. A plaque with black words on a white background entered Yixian's eyes. It's been 4 years and I'm back here. Yixian muttered softly as a trace of bitterness flashed through his eyes. Yixian clearly remembered his mother's desperate eyes, his brother's clenched fists, his sister's red eyes from crying, and the letter that his indifferent father sent. That day, Yixian disappeared from the hospital at night, because he didn't want to die in front of his family and make them sad for him. Back to the old place, things were still there, but people had changed. 4 years had passed. No one knew what he had experienced. He could live until now because he had walked out of a sea of blood and bones. His experience could not be described to others. A sea of blood drifted. All hopes turned to dust, struggling between life and death, reviving amidst destruction and destruction. Blood. Endless blood. Mournful yet magnificent. Yixian's thoughts were absent-minded. His 4 years of experience were like a bloody nightmare. He was deeply immersed in his memories. His expression would occasionally distort and become tyrannical. Only when a sudden voice sounded out did he suddenly wake up. An old man in his 50s in a security uniform opened the door to the mailroom and walked quickly toward Yixian. Hey young man, don't stand outside on such a cold day. Are you in trouble? Sir, may I ask if Dr. Xiaqiu is here? Yixian asked. Are you talking about Director Xiaqiu? The old man said as he pulled Yixian toward the mailroom. When the two of them entered the room, they were isolated from the cold wind and snow outside. Sir, can you help me contact Dr. Xiaqiu? Yixian went straight to the point. Okay, give me a moment. The old man did not nag. He picked up the phone on the table and dialed. In the director's office, Xiaqiu was looking at the medical records in her hands. When the phone rang beside her, she picked it up. Hello. Director Xia? There's a young man looking for you. What's his name? Does he have an appointment? As the hospital's chief physician, Xiaqiu had to receive many family members of patients every day. Naturally, she was not surprised that someone was looking for her. By the way, what's your name? The old man's voice came from the other end of the phone. Yixian. Yi as in Juye, Xian as in Xianyuan. Crack. Suddenly, the glass in Xiaqiu's hand fell to the ground with the sound of glass shattering. She was completely stunned. Hello. Director Xia, what's wrong? The old man's voice came from the other end of the phone. No. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Let him come see me. Xiaqiu bit her lips. Her voice was intermittent. If one listened carefully, they would notice that her voice was mixed with extreme shock. It was no wonder that Xiaqiu was so shocked. She would never forget a scene. 4 years ago, a young man lying on a hospital bed. When she first asked for his name, he gave her the same answer. Auntie, my name is Yixian. Yi as in Juye, Xian as in Xianyuan. Suffering from a terminal illness and at the end of his life, the young man was only 14 years old. However, he could face death with a smile. If it were any other adult, they would not be as calm as the young man. This left a deep impression on Xiaqiu. Unfortunately, the young man escaped from the hospital late one night. Since then there had been no news of him. However, Xiaqiu knew very well that the young man named Yixian did not want his family to see him pass away in pain at the end of his life. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. That child was already in the late stages of cancer. 4 years have passed. I'm afraid that child has already. As Yixian's attending physician, no one knew Yixian's condition better than she did. She was absolutely certain that the young man had already been buried in the yellow soil. Damn it. This joke is not funny at all. No matter who you are, I will not forgive you. Clearly, joking about a dead child was an unforgivable mistake for a professional like Xiaqiu. Xiaqiu suppressed her anger and waited coldly for the other party to appear. However, her tight grip on her pen betrayed her unsettled emotions. Chapter 2. Knock knock knock. There was a series of knocks on the door. Xiaqiu's voice was slightly cold as she said, "Come in." The door was pushed open and Yixian entered. When he saw Xiaqiu's familiar face, a smile appeared on his face. "Hello, Auntie Xia. You're still so beautiful after so many years." Xiaqiu, who was burning with anger, was stunned by how Yixian addressed her. Then she laughed coldly and said, "I don't care who you are. But your joke isn't funny at all. Also, please don't call me auntie. You don't have the right to call me that." Xiaqiu's attitude was very unfriendly. Yixian knew that there was a misunderstanding. "You really don't recognize me?" Yixian frowned slightly. "How would I know someone like you?" You are?" Xiaqiu wanted to reprimand him. But when she took a closer look at Yixian's face, an extremely familiar feeling welled up in her heart. She couldn't continue her words. "4 years ago, you were my attending doctor." Like a sudden clap of thunder from the 9th heaven, like the rolling waves of the vast ocean, Xiaqiu was completely stunned when she heard Yixian's voice. Her body was trembling and her lips were pale. This was because the appearance of the young man in front of her was constantly merging with that of the young man from before. After a minute, Xiaqiu's breathing began to quicken. Bang! Xiaqiu's face was pale. She slammed her hands on the table and stood up. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. That child is dead," Xiaqiu said with a trembling voice. However, her eyes were filled with horror as she looked at Yixian. "Tell me. Who are you?" At this moment, Xiaqiu became hysterical. She was a doctor, and as far as she knew, it was impossible for anyone to survive such a terminal illness. Looking at Xiaqiu's pale face, Yixian's eyes were filled with helplessness. He also knew that in normal people's minds, his appearance would definitely cause a commotion. That's right, how could a person who should have died 4 years ago still be alive? Yixian laughed at himself and continued, "I'm not dead. I'm alive and well in front of you. Please believe me." The truth was right in front of her eyes, and Xiaqiu had no choice but to believe it. However, this sudden incident had completely overturned her understanding of the world. It was only a few minutes later that she slowly regained her senses. During this time, Yixian did not disturb Xiaqiu. Clearly, he was giving Xiaqiu time to come to terms with the situation. You're really little Not a ghost? Ghost? Lu Xian muttered to himself. Some terrifying blood-red figures involuntarily appeared in his mind, and a wisp of disdain flashed through his eyes. However, he concealed it very well. Auntie Xia, I'm really not a ghost. I'm here to ask if you know my mother's current address? When Yixian returned to the city, he had naturally returned to his former residence. However, that place had been demolished, and even his mother's phone could not be reached. That was why he thought of Xiaqiu, and that was why this scene unfolded before him. At this moment, Xiaqiu had completely calmed down and gradually accepted the fact that Yixian was still alive. When you ran away, your mother was devastated. Back then I still had some contact with her. However, 4 years have passed and I don't know where she is. Xiaqiu frowned slightly. Upon hearing this news, Yixian's eyes flashed with disappointment. Even Xiaqiu did not know where his mother and siblings were. How was he supposed to find them? Could it be that he had to go to the capital city's Yi family? The Yi family? Ha! Thinking of the so-called Yi family, Yixian could not stop laughing coldly in his heart. When he opened and closed his eyes, a wisp of blood flashed through them. Oh right, I remember now. Suddenly Xiaqiu exclaimed. Her face was filled with excitement as she said, after you ran away, your mother erected a cenotaph for you in the North Hill Public Cemetery. Every year on your birthday, she would definitely visit your grave. My cenotaph? Yixian paused after every word. Then, he closed his eyes and his mother's face appeared in his mind. His body trembled uncontrollably, and the atmosphere around him became even more oppressive. Yixian would always remember that when he was 5 years old, he and his mother were chased out of the Yi family. His siblings were only 3 years old at that time. He had seen how much his mother had suffered over the years. In the 4 years that he had disappeared, Yixian could imagine how difficult it must have been for his mother to raise his siblings. Yi family, you'd better pray that I can find my mother. Otherwise, a cruel smile appeared on Yixian's face. Although his voice was calm, it gave off an extremely terrifying feeling. It was as if a sleeping demon king was slowly opening his eyes. Xiaqiu did not know if it was her imagination, but when she saw the flash of blood in Yixian's eyes, she suddenly took a few steps back. A layer of cold sweat drenched her back. What kind of look was that? What had Xiao Yi gone through in the 4 years that he had disappeared? A chill ran down her spine, as if she had fallen into an abyss. This was what Xiaqiu felt. She seemed to have seen a bloody scene in Yixian's eyes. One person, one path. An endless sea of blood was churning. On both sides of the sea were piles of bones. Thousands of blood souls were wailing, and countless living beings were crying. In that sea of blood, a figure had his back to all living beings. Stepping on the piles of bones, he finally ascended the throne of bones. Perhaps sensing Xiaqiu's panic, Yixian quickly woke up from his deep thoughts. His aura was restrained to the extreme, and he gave Xiaqiu an apologetic smile. Auntie Xia. Yixian was just about to speak when he frowned slightly and looked outside the room. No, you can't come in, Aya. There was a commotion outside the office, accompanied by a nurse's cry of pain. This made Xiaqiu's expression change. She hurriedly said to Yixian, Xiao Yi, wait here for a while. Auntie has some things to deal with. I'll talk to you later. Looking at Xiaqiu's back as she hurriedly left, Yixian narrowed his eyes and slowly followed her. Hospital lobby. Several bodyguards in black suits surrounded a young man and woman. The surrounding nurses and doctors were afraid, but they still blocked the young man and woman's path. Young Master Li, your brother had a sudden asthma attack. When he was sent here, he was already not breathing. This has nothing to do with Dr. Xia. You get out of my way. Li Mingzi kicked the doctor on duty in front of him. His expression was extremely gloomy. My brother only had an acute asthma attack. How could he die so easily? It must be Xiaqiu who killed my brother. Tell her to get out here. The Li family doesn't want to make things difficult for you. This has nothing to do with you. I hope you can take care of yourself. The young woman's appearance was beautiful, and her clothes were expensive. When she spoke, she was gentle and polite, but at this moment her face was slightly gloomy. The Li family was a famous family in Jiangnan City. They were second to none in the business world and the political world. Their Kaishan group was involved in several industries and was definitely a giant in Jiangnan City. There were also rumors that the Li family had the support of the underworld, but it was not confirmed. After the autopsy, the Li siblings naturally knew that their brother's death had nothing to do with Xiaoqiu. However, the Li family's old man had lost his beloved son. In order to appease the old man's grief, the Li siblings could only use Xiaoqiu as a scapegoat. Ordinary people could not afford to offend the Li family. This was why the doctors and nurses were afraid of the Li siblings. Your brother's death has nothing to do with me. You can go to the Supreme Court and sue me. If I'm really guilty, the Hanging Mirror Department will naturally send people to arrest me. Please don't make trouble out of nothing. Xiaoqiu shouted and quickly walked to the hospital lobby. There was no fear in her eyes when she looked at the Li siblings. Chapter 3. You finally dared to come out. Come with me. Li Mingzi sneered and gave the bodyguards beside him a look, telling them to go up and arrest her. After receiving Li Mingzi's signal, the bodyguards smiled ferociously and rushed towards Xiaoqiu. This also caused the nurses to cover their mouths and cry out, obviously frightened. Stop! Suddenly an old voice sounded, causing the bodyguards to stop and look towards the source of the voice. They saw an old man in his 60s wearing a white coat, quickly walking to Xiaoqiu's side. He was the director of Jiangnan Hospital and was also a famous medical master. Li Mingzhu smiled gently and stepped forward. Elder Bai, you are an elder. As juniors, we naturally don't dare to be disrespectful to you. However, my third brother's death is related to Dr. Xia. I'm afraid we have offended you this time. When Li Mingzhu said this, she directly ignored Director Bai. Her voice suddenly turned cold as she said, Men, take Dr. Xia away. Don't hurt Director Bai. After receiving Li Mingzhu's signal, the bodyguards didn't dare to be negligent and immediately came up to arrest her. Although Director Bai was famous, he was no match for the powerful bodyguards. He was directly stopped by one of the bodyguards. You have no respect for the law. Director Bai was furious, but he couldn't stop these fierce bodyguards. Facing several bodyguards, Xiaoqiu was only a woman after all. Her face also turned pale. She knew deeply that if she was taken away by the other party, she would really be listed as a missing person. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside Xiaoqiu. He just glanced at the bodyguards indifferently and made them freeze on the spot. Hiss! The sound of cold air being sucked in continuously came from the mouths of the bodyguards. Their footsteps were even more stagnant. Their originally ferocious faces were even more dignified. Murderous aura, what a strong murderous aura! At the same time, the same thought arose in the bodyguards' minds. To be able to protect the Li siblings, these bodyguards weren't ordinary people. Although they worked for the Li family for money, they were all retired special forces. Some of them had even been on the battlefield and could be said to be extremely sensitive to murderous aura. They were certain that the person standing before them had killed more than a single person. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the killing intent emanating from him to be so intense. At this moment, Yixian stood silently beside Xiaoqiu. His expression was indifferent and he did not say a word. However, the entire hospital was enveloped in a strange atmosphere. It was as if something was pressing down on everyone's minds, giving them a sense of dizziness. Little Yixian, why did you come out? This has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and go back. Xiaoqiu panicked at Yixian's appearance. She was afraid that he would be dragged into this matter. It's fine. Yixian said softly. Kid, who are you? How dare you meddle in our Li family's affairs? Li Mingzi's face was gloomy. He could already tell that Yixian was a little strange. Otherwise, how could he stop the bodyguards beside him? Go back to where you came from. I hope you know your limits. Yixian's voice was very calm and did not reveal any power. However, when he finished speaking, the temperature in the hospital hall quietly dropped a few degrees. Young Master Li, a bodyguard had unknowingly appeared in front of the Li siblings. He then turned around to look at Yixian. The fear in his eyes became more and more dignified. What's going on? Why aren't you arresting him? Li Mingzi reprimanded. Young Master Li, listen to me. This person is not ordinary. Let's go back first and I'll tell you in detail. The bodyguard said in a low voice. He's alone. What are you afraid of? Ah? Li Mingze angrily rebuked the bodyguard's suggestion. They had already offended Dean Bai today. If they retreated now, wouldn't the gains not make up for the losses? Li Mingzhu frowned and looked deeply at Yi Xian in the distance. She whispered to Li Mingze, "Brother, listen to He Bao. Let's go back first." Li Mingzhu was usually the one who gave him ideas. Li Mingze trusted his sister very much. Even she said so, Li Mingze knew that something was wrong. Let's go," Li Mingze said gloomily. Before leaving, he glared at Yi Xian fiercely and left with several bodyguards. The Li siblings came aggressively but left in a hurry. This made everyone in the hospital confused. They didn't know why they let Dr. Xiaqiu go so easily. Our Dean Bai is still the most powerful. The Li siblings must be afraid of our Dean Bai. Needless to say, our Dean Bai is an old classmate of the Jiangnan magistrate. Even if the Li family is powerful, they still have to give face to our Dean. After the Li siblings left, some doctors and nurses began to talk. "Little Xia, this is..." Dean Bai came to Xiaqiu and looked at Yi Xian with surprise. Although he was in his 60s, he was not a foolish old man. He saw the scene just now. If the Li siblings were really afraid of him, why would they let the bodyguards arrest him? Obviously, the other party's retreat had something to do with this young man. "Dean Bai, this is one of my nephews. His name is Yi Xian." Xiaqiu, who'd recovered from her shock, hurriedly introduced Yi Xian to Dean Bai. "Young man, not bad." Dean Bai laughed and was about to pat Yi Xian's shoulder. However, before the other party could get close, Yi Xian moved to the side and dodged the other party's palm. This caused Dean Bai to be stunned on the spot with an awkward expression. "Andy Xia, I have something to do. I'll come and see you later." After saying this, Yi Xian didn't look at Dean Bai and walked out of the hospital. "Little Yi, wait." Unfortunately, before Xiaqiu could finish, Yi Xian had already disappeared from the hospital lobby. "Little Xia, your nephew is not ordinary. How come I've never heard you mention him?" Dean Bai looked at Yi Xian's back and sighed. Sigh. Xiaqiu sighed helplessly. She didn't know how to tell Dean Bai. She couldn't tell him that Yi Xian had a terminal illness 4 years ago but was still alive. This kind of topic, she was afraid that Dean Bai would treat her as a lunatic. Chapter 4. On the snowy street, 2 luxurious cars were speeding forward. The surrounding cars kept a certain distance from them, afraid of colliding with them on the slippery road. "Black Panther, what happened just now? Why did we retreat?" Li Mingze was extremely dissatisfied and questioned Black Panther in the car. Although Li Mingzhu didn't say anything, she looked at Black Panther with confusion in her eyes. "Young master, young miss, listen to me. That person is very likely to be an ancient warrior. If we really have a conflict in the hospital, we will definitely be at a disadvantage," Black Panther said seriously. "Hiss." As He Bao's voice fell, the Li siblings sucked in a breath of cold air as fear flashed across their eyes. "He really is an ancient warrior?" Li Mingzhu asked hurriedly. "I'm not sure, but young miss, young master, didn't you feel it? Why is that person fearless in front of our Li family?" Also, when he appeared, the temperature of the entire hospital hall dropped a little. Black Panther analyzed. With Black Panther's reminder, the Li siblings quickly recalled. Not long after, fine beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. Ancient warrior. If he really is an ancient warrior, then we? Li Mingze's voice trembled and his eyes were filled with fear. He couldn't continue speaking. "Brother, don't worry. Even if he really is an ancient warrior, our Li family is not to be trifled with. When we get home, we will investigate this person's background, and then..." Screech, all of a sudden. Without waiting for Li Mingzhu to finish speaking, the driver slammed on the brakes, causing the car to slide a few meters and directly hit the protective barrier. The Li siblings in the car were shocked. "Old Zhang, how can you drive?" Li Mingze scolded angrily. Young Master Li. There is someone in front." The driver panicked. "So what if there is someone? Just kill him." Li Mingze was already in a bad mood, and after encountering such a situation, his arrogant and domineering nature was exposed. "Young master, young miss, are you okay?" The bodyguard's car quickly opened and several bodyguards came directly to the Li siblings' car. "Humph, I want to see which blind dog dares to block the car and ask for death." Li Mingzi said as he opened the car door and looked at the road ahead. Woo woo woo. The cold wind whistled and snow filled the sky. A lonely figure slowly walked out from the wind and snow. He faced the wind, stepped on the snow, and slowly moved forward. The snow danced wildly, and the cold wind was like the roar of a ferocious beast. The bone-chilling coldness invaded the minds of the Li siblings. Tap tap tap. Like the beating of the war drums of the dead, like a soul-burying lament, every time Yixian landed. It was as if the god of the underworld was walking the mortal realm, as if he could harvest the souls of all living things at any time. It's you. When Yixian's face was revealed to the Li siblings, they cried out in shock. He Bao's face was cold as he quickly pulled out a pistol from his bosom. Several bodyguards followed closely behind and locked onto Yixian with several pitch-black guns. Friend, what are you trying to do? Black Panther's body tensed up, and his voice was extremely gloomy. As the saying goes, if you don't have a diamond drill, don't take on a porcelain job. The appearance of the other party was obviously not a good thing. Moreover, Black Panther was completely certain that the other party was an ancient martial artist. One had to know that they were driving at a speed of 80 miles per hour. Furthermore, they were traveling at an extremely fast speed on a snowy day. However, the other party was able to stop them in front of them. If he was not an ancient martial artist, how was this possible? Unfortunately, Yixian did not answer Black Panther's question. Yixian continued to move forward in the wind and snow. The biting cold wind blew his loose hair, making him look like a banished immortal living in the mortal realm, giving off an elegant and otherworldly feeling. Stop. You stop, Lao Tzu, or I'll shoot. Facing Yixian, who was getting closer and closer, Black Panther's face was ferocious. His back was already drenched in sweat, and his hands holding the gun were trembling non-stop. This was because he could feel that he was not facing a human but a legendary god. The invisible pressure was tormenting him, as if it was going to torture him until he went crazy. Bang! A gunshot rang out and a tongue of flame shot out. Under such immense pressure, Black Panther finally collapsed completely. He pulled the trigger directly, and a yellow bullet tore through the air and shot towards Yixian. Bang! 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 The sound of gunfire was incessant, and it was exceptionally ear-piercing in the wind and snow. Not only was Black Panther unable to withstand the pressure from Yixian, but the other bodyguards were also unable to withstand it. Huff! 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 Black Panther panted heavily as he stared at the figure in front of him. His eyes were filled with the brutality of a desperado. Is he dead? Li Mingzi asked in a trembling voice behind him. Young master, young miss, run. All of a sudden Black Panther let out a loud roar. The expression on his face was already filled with horror because he saw an unbelievable scene. At this moment Yixian did not move. His hands were behind his back as he stood in the snow. Dozens of yellow bullets floated in front of him. This scene was simply appalling. Suddenly Yixian moved. A pair of jade-like sword fingers pierced through the void, causing a clanging sound to be heard. The dozens of bullets floating in front of Yixian suddenly trembled violently. Following the movement of Yixian's sword fingers, they all shot towards Black Panther and the others. Puff! 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 Black Panther's eyes gradually became lax. A stream of blood slowly flowed out from between his eyebrows until his corpse fell in the wind and snow. His entire body was lifeless. Not only Black Panther, but several bodyguards also had a thick bloody hole in between their eyebrows. It was obvious that they were not going to survive. And the thing that killed them was the bullets they fired just now. Ah! Such a scene made Li Mingzi scream. Even though she was beautiful and intelligent, she was just a woman in the face of such a terrifying scene. Thud! 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 Yixian continued to move forward, but every step he took felt like he was stepping on the hearts of the Li siblings. This was the footsteps of the dead, but also the harvest of the Grim Reaper. A great sense of powerlessness filled the hearts of the siblings. Don't come over! Li Mingzi screamed in fear. His whole body kept retreating. He staggered and fell into the snow. Buzz! The void shook and the air exploded. Yixian took a step forward and directly appeared in front of Li Mingzi. He looked down at the people under his feet. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only an indifferent look in his eyes. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Fragile life, disappear from now on. Yixian whispered. When his sword fingers moved, a cold light flashed across Li Ming's neck. His head was separated from his body and he was completely silent. You devil, what grudge do we have with you? Why do you want to kill us? Li Mingzhu's hair was scattered. She was like a madwoman. Her delicate body kept retreating as she questioned Yixian hysterically. Yixian don't need a reason to kill. You can die now, Yixian said calmly. When he raised his sword fingers, he was about to kill this woman in the snow. Looking at Yixian's calm eyes, Li Mingzhu could feel that he had no intention of letting her go. Facing the great terror of life and death, she cried out loud and begged Yixian bitterly. Don't kill me. My Li family can give you whatever you want. Money, power, women. Or, if I marry you, the entire Li family will be yours in the future. Yixian was as calm as ever in the face of Li Mingzhu's pleas. He was not moved by Li Mingzhu's promise. Buzz! There was a strange sound in the void and a cold light flashed. Yixian's sword fingers fell, and Li Mingzhu's head was separated from her body. Blood spurted out from her neck and dyed the pure white snow red. Her eyes were wide open before she died. Even in death, she could not believe that she would die in vain in this snow. He turned around indifferently without any ripples. Yixian stepped on the flying snow and gradually disappeared into the distance. However, his hoarse voice sounded in this world. Money is nothing but fleeting clouds. Power is nothing but an illusion. Women are nothing but pink skeletons. What I, Yixian, want, how can you understand? Chapter 5. The night sky was filled with stars. Yixian stood on top of the Jianghai Bridge. He looked at the bright moon in the sky. His starry eyes seemed to be in a trance. Yixian was someone who would repay kindness and repay enmity. Back then, when he was seriously ill, Xiaqiu had personally reduced all sorts of medical expenses for him. He had always remembered this favor in his heart. He did not know who the Li siblings were, but it did not matter to Yixian. In his mind, all the trouble came from the Li siblings. Once he killed them, there would be no more trouble. Perhaps some people would think that Yixian was a brute. But 4 years of experience had taught him that when a person's strength surpassed the mortal world, the so-called schemes and tricks were nothing but a joke in the face of absolute power. The cold wind blew, lifting a few strands of Yixian's hair. It also woke him up from his thoughts. The 13th of January, the 8th of the 12th lunar month. 3 more days. Mom, will you really show up? Yixian mumbled to himself. The 8th of the 12th lunar month was Yixian's birthday. If what Xiaqiu said was true, then every year on his birthday, his mother would visit his grave. He would definitely be able to see her. After dispersing his chaotic emotions, Yixian took a step forward and transformed into a ray of light that disappeared from the bridge. At the same time, at the scene of the death of the Li siblings, ear-piercing sirens could be heard. A yellow quarantine tape surrounded the road, and dozens of constables with grave expressions were constantly investigating the scene. Who died? Are there any clues? A police car drove into the scene, and a slender female constable got out of the car. Her uniform had a unique tight-fitting charm, and her curvaceous figure was completely displayed. Her skin was as white as snow. Her eyebrows were picturesque. Coupled with her serious face, she gave off a cold and stunning vibe. Boss, the dead are the Li siblings. One of the constables said with a heavy expression. Which Li siblings? Could it be? Lu Jundai was stunned. Without waiting for her subordinate to answer, she quickly entered the scene of the murder. Even though she had seen many murder scenes, Lu Jundai could not help but gasp when she saw the Li siblings' decapitated bodies. There were also a few bodyguards who died on the spot. The Li siblings from the Kaixing group? Good. Lu Jundai snorted coldly after recovering from her shock. The forensic doctor beside her did not dare to reply. After all, the Li family was a powerful family. Except for this lady in front of them, no one would dare to offend the Li family. Constable Lu, this is the autopsy report. Please take a look. The forensic doctor handed a document to Lu Jundai. Lu Jundai. With the autopsy, of course. According to the autopsy report, the Li siblings were killed by a sharp blade. Lu Jundai was not surprised, but the way the bodyguards died was extremely strange. They were killed by their own bullets of the world. Sir, this is the CCTV footage. As one of the constables played the CCTV footage, Lu Jundai could not help but feel uneasy. In the surveillance video, because of the snow, no one could see the face of the murderer. What shocked Lu Jundai the most was that several bodyguards fired at the same time, but in just a few seconds all of them fell to the ground, while the murderer did not move at all. Due to the heavy snow, the CCTV footage is very blurry. We have no idea how the murderer killed them. Also, the murder weapon was not found at the scene. The forensic doctor said solemnly, "Have you notified the Li family?" Lu Jundai put down the CCTV report and asked. "Yes, the head of the Li family is on his way." One of the constables replied. Screech. The sound of brakes screeching came from outside the cordon. A luxurious car was opened, and an old man in his 50s got out of the car with a walking stick. He was accompanied by several bodyguards as he walked towards Lu Jundai. "Hello, Constable Lu. I would like to see the bodies of my children." Li Zongshan's face was calm, but the veins on his hand were popping. He was not as calm as he looked. "Please." Lu Jundai did not like the Li family, but as a constable, she had to let the family know the identity of the victims. As Li Zongshan entered the scene with his bodyguards, he stumbled when he saw the tragic death of the Li siblings. He then steadied himself and stared at the scene in front of him, as if he wanted to imprint the scene in his mind. Phew! Li Zongshan let out a deep breath and turned to Lu Jundai. "I have lost 3 beloved children in a month. I will have to trouble the hanging mirror department with this case." Li Zongshan saluted Lu Jundai and left with his bodyguards. He did not look at the Li siblings again. Looking at Li Zongshan's back, Lu Jundai frowned. Her eyes were heavy. "The sky of Jiangnan is about to change," Lu Jundai murmured. As the saying goes, a dog that bites does not bark. This was a perfect example of Li Zongshan. He could still control his emotions when his children were killed. This kind of person was undoubtedly the most terrifying. A luxurious car drove slowly on the road. Inside the car, Li Zongshan closed his eyes and rested. However, his lips were trembling uncontrollably. His old hand gripped his walking stick tightly. An extremely oppressive atmosphere was brewing in the car. "Tell Wu Jun to come see me." When Li Zongshan opened his eyes again, his face was extremely ferocious. His voice sounded like it was about to swallow someone whole. "Oh, master, you can't." The bodyguard's face was pale as he tried to persuade Li Zongshan. "Shut up. My Li family is finished. What else do I not dare to do?" Li Zongshan's eyes were bloodshot as he roared like a mad dog. "Yes, master." Facing the furious Li Zongshan, the bodyguard did not dare to disobey. He immediately dialed the satellite phone in his hand. Jiangnan City, Beishan Cemetery. Beishan Cemetery was located in the north of Jiangnan City. It was transformed from a barren mountain. Every Qingming festival, many people would visit the cemetery to pay their respects. However, it was the cold winter of the 12th lunar month. There was no one in the cemetery. Even the caretaker of the cemetery was hiding in his room and drinking to get rid of the coldness in his body. The sky was filled with snow. There were many tombstones. A figure walked through the Beishan cemetery until he stopped in front of a tombstone. The tombstone of Yixian Han Chiyun. The tombstone was cold. It was black and white. Yixian looked at the tombstone in front of him quietly. No matter how the wind and snow blew, his body stood still. Han Chiyun, this was the name of Yixian's mother. Tomorrow was the 8th day of the 12th lunar month. It was also Yixian's birthday. He stood in front of the tombstone, quietly waiting for the arrival of his mother. Chapter 6. Blood, blood, bleak and beautiful blood, bones, bones, the corpses of all kinds of creatures. The souls of the dead were wailing, and the creatures were crying. Yixian held the blood-colored halberd in his hand as he fought in the blood-colored river. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" Yixian roared into the sky as if he had gone mad. "Ah! Who am I? I am Yixian, the immortal heavenly lord." With a quiver, Yixian abruptly woke up. Only now did he realize that he wasn't inside the door. He'd already left that place and returned to the bustling city. Quickly dispelling the violent emotions in his heart, Yixian operated his cultivation method to stabilize himself. After a full 10 minutes, the blood in his eyes gradually receded. There is no spiritual qi in this world. This should be the Dharma ending age mentioned in the Immortal scripture. It is impossible for immortal cultivators to exist in this world. If I want to go further, do I really have to enter the legendary Earth Immortal realm? Yixian muttered to himself with a complicated look in his eyes. Although Yixian's cultivation method did not require much spiritual qi, this world was in the Dharma ending age, which was extremely unfavorable for Yixian. Yixian temporarily suppressed his troubled thoughts. He could only take one step at a time. Looking up at the sky, Yixian found that the sun had risen. There were also some strangers in the North Hill Public Cemetery who came to pay respects and sweep the grave, but there was no sign of his mother. This made Yixian slightly disappointed. Wait, Yixian could only wait. Time passed quickly. Yixian stood in front of his cenotaph, but he did not see his mother for a long time. This made him slightly uneasy. Tap tap tap. Suddenly, a series of light footsteps came from behind Yixian, which made Yixian's body stiffen. Although he did not look back, his divine sense had already seen the person behind him. A woman with white hair, chaotic and lifeless eyes, and a slightly aged face. She seemed to be around 60 years old. She was staggering towards Yixian, and from time to time she would gasp for breath. It was obvious that her body wasn't in a good condition. At this moment, time seemed to stagnate and space seemed to freeze. The world was silent, and there was no sound. Yixian's emotionless eyes gradually changed. A touch of warmth and guilt emerged from his eyes. His unmoving body trembled slightly, proving that his heart was not calm. If the creatures within the door saw Yixian's current state, they would probably be extremely shocked. When had Yixian, who was known as the undying heavenly sovereign, ever had such a weak appearance? At this moment, Yixian did not dare to face Mother Yi. The deep guilt eroded his mind. He clearly remembered that his mother was only 38 years old this year. After 4 years, she had aged to this extent. This was inseparable from him. Are you Yixian's former classmate? How rare. I didn't expect that after so many years, someone would still come to visit him. Mother Yi staggered over. Her voice was a little hoarse and her eyes were cloudy. Obviously, she did not recognize that the person in front of her was her son. Mother Yi silently cleared the snow in front of the tombstone. She took out a plate of braised carp from the basket and silently placed it in front of the tombstone. She looked at the cenotaph in front of her in a daze. Today is Yixian's birthday. I remember that he loved to eat my braised carp when he was young. Every time on his birthday I would cook it for him. Mother Yi murmured to herself. 2 lines of clear tears flowed from her cloudy eyes. Rumble. High in the sky in the clouds blue lightning loomed. Thousands of lightning bolts crisscrossed. An extremely terrifying heavenly pressure covered the entire Beishan public cemetery, as if the end of the world had come. It was simply unimaginable for such a celestial phenomenon to occur in the cold winter of the 12th lunar month. It also made the worshippers in the Beishan public cemetery cry out in alarm. However, no one noticed that Yixian's body was trembling and his breath was extremely chaotic. Obviously, this terrifying celestial phenomenon was caused by Yixian. The heavenly venerate was in grief and the world was turned upside down. This was not just a saying. It was a real thing. Mom, I'm sorry. Thunder and snow covered the sky. Yixian could not suppress his emotions and poured out. He hugged Mother Yi tightly in his arms. Young man, have you mistaken me for someone else? Mother Yi exclaimed. Mom, look at me. Look at me carefully. I'm really Yixian. I'm back alive. Yixian's voice trembled. As Yixian's voice fell, Mother Yi rubbed her cloudy eyes hard. When she carefully looked at Yixian's face, she was completely stunned. Am I dreaming? My son is not dead yet? Mother Yi murmured to herself. Tears flowed out uncontrollably. Mom, you're not dreaming. I'm really not dead. I was saved by an extraordinary person. All these years, that extraordinary person cured my illness. That's why I can come back to see you. Yixian could only tell a white lie because he could not tell Mother Yi what he had experienced in the past 4 years. At this moment, the mother and son hugged each other and cried. Mother Yi finally believed that her son who had disappeared for 4 years was really not dead, and had really returned to her side. Time passed quickly. Mother Yi kept asking Yixian about his experience in these years, which also let Yixian evade one by one. It was not until sunset that the mother and son left the Beishan cemetery. Home. This word was so far away from Yixian that 4 years had passed. He struggled between life and death and did not dare to have the slightest delusion. It was not until he stepped into the heavenly venerate realm and opened the door that he had the concept of home in his heart. North of Jiangnan City, Shanty Town. Bungalows of uneven height were endless. The pothole dirt road was extremely difficult to walk on. In this prosperous Jiangnan City, Shanty Town was the place where the poor lived. A modeled bungalow seemed to have been built in the last century. The rusty iron door proved that the house had been there for some years. At this moment the iron door was opened. Mother Ye's face was full of uncontrollable joy. She took Yixian's hand and entered the house. A narrow courtyard and a bungalow. This was the scene that came into Yixian's eyes. "Xian, you haven't eaten yet, right? Mom will cook for you," Mother Yi said as she pressed Yixian into the house. She went straight into the kitchen to prepare dinner. "Mom, where are little brother and little sister?" As Yixian asked, Mother Ye's body stiffened. The smile on her face was a little forced. She said, "Mom will go and cook first. We'll talk later." Looking at Mother Ye's forced smile, Yixian would be too stupid if he did not know that there was a problem here. "Mom, wait a minute, bang." Suddenly, a muffled sound came from the iron door outside the door. There was also the sound of a man and a woman quarreling. "Stupid girl, I'll see where you run to. You can either pay back the money or submit to Lao Tzu." "Stupid bear, you want to play this game with me? You still have a long way to go." Ouch! A burst of noise came from outside the door, startling Yixian. An extremely bad feeling grew in his heart. "This woman's voice is?" Yixian frowned. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was great surprise. "Ling is back. I'll go out and take a look." Mother Yi sighed and walked straight out the door. "Ling Yixian suddenly stood up and took a step out. With a strange sound he appeared outside the door. Outside the Yi family's house, a young girl and a young man were in the middle of a fierce argument. When Yixian saw the young girl's face, his mind went into a trance. She had a head of yellow hair, colorful earrings and a face full of makeup. She wore a pair of beanie shoes and pencil pants. She looked exactly like a delinquent girl. Although Yi Ling wore heavy makeup, under Yixian's consciousness, he could still recognize that she was his sister. But in Yixian's memory, his sister was a gentle and polite girl. Not to mention a delinquent girl's appearance, she would not even speak vulgarities. But what did he see? Not only did Yi Ling speak vulgarities, but she also kicked the man in the crotch. This scene made Yixian frown. What happened in the family in 4 years? Chapter 7. Yixian looked at the scene in front of him silently. His sister should not be like this. What kind of experience made Yi Ling like this? "Ling who are you arguing with again?" Yimu's mother came late, her eyes filled with worry. "Mom, don't worry about my business." Yimu's appearance did not make Yi Ling restrain her rebellious nature. Instead, she kept on pushing and shoving the young man. "Old thing, you came out just in time. Your daughter owes me a gambling debt. If you don't pay it back today, you can just recognize me as your son-in-law." The young man laughed evilly. As he kept on pushing and shoving Yi Ling he even touched some of her sensitive areas. If not for Yi Ling's nimble body, she would have been taken advantage of. How could a young girl be a match for a strong man? Just as the strong man grabbed Yi Ling's hands, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded. "If you don't want to die, you better let go of her." Yixian came behind the strong man, his eyes cold. Damn, which bastard dares to meddle in Lao Tzu's business? The young man's expression froze for a moment before he abruptly turned around to look at Yixian. What entered his eyes was a young man with gray hair and ancient clothes. "Xian come in quickly. Your sister can handle this." Mother Yi didn't clearly see when Yixian appeared, but in her impression, her son was polite and didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. How could he be a match for this young man in front of her? As Yimu's voice fell, the young man did not feel anything. However, Yi Ling who was struggling in his hands, froze. Her eyes unconsciously looked at Yi Xian. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 years passed. When the brother and sister's eyes met, Yi Ling was completely stunned, as if she had lost her soul. Boy, I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me? Being ignored by Yi Xian, the young man was furious. He let go of Yi Ling and strode towards Yi Xian. Unfortunately, before he could get close to Yi Xian, what happened next shocked Yi Mu's mother. Gotcha! Yi Xian's jade-like palm suddenly grabbed the young man's neck and slowly lifted him into the air. His 5 jade-like fingers tightened around the young man's neck, causing the man's throat to crack. Ah, no, no. His face swelled red and gradually turned purple. The young man's eyes rolled back as he struggled in the air in a sorry state. He even let out a howl like a pig being slaughtered. Breathing was difficult, his head was dizzy, and his tongue was unconsciously sticking out of his mouth. It probably wouldn't be long before Yi Xian choked him to death. A murderous glint appeared in Yi Xian's eyes. He exerted force in his palm, as if he was going to kill this person in the next moment. In the nick of time, Mother Ye's cry of alarm was heard. Xianer, let go. He'll die. As Yi Mu's voice fell, Yi Xian frowned slightly and released the strong man's palm. He couldn't kill in front of Yi Mu. She couldn't accept it. However, while the death penalty could be avoided, the punishment could not be forgiven. Gotcha! Yi Xian suddenly grabbed the strong man's left palm and exerted a huge force on it. The strong man's palm instantly became soft like a pile of mud, and the man's ear-piercing cry of pain was heard. Ah, my hand, my hand! The young man rolled violently in the snow. The pain in his palm made him sweat all over. I will return the money my sister owes you, but you have to remember that if you continue to pester her, it won't be as simple as crippling one of your hands. Yi Xian calmly spoke, but when the burly man heard it, it caused an extremely cold feeling to rise from the bottom of his heart. He didn't dare to leave behind any harsh words. The young man struggled to get up and ran away. Clearly, Yi Xian gave him a great sense of fear. As the young man left, Mother Yi walked quickly to Yi Ling and said, Ling, your brother didn't die. His illness is cured. Now your brother is back. Hurry up and call him brother. At this time, Yi Ling was staring at Yi Xian. Even when Mother Yi spoke, she didn't have the slightest reaction. Yi Xian silently looked at Yi Ling, his heart full of mixed feelings. Ha! Brother! Yi Ling came back to her senses and sneered. Yi Ling don't have a brother. What kind of brother is he? Is he worthy? Yi Ling turned and walked home, not looking at Yi Xian again. Mother Ye's expression was lonely, as if she had aged a few years at this moment. Looking at Yi Ling's back, Yi Xian's mind was like a wave. His thoughts were in a trance at this moment. The memories of the brother and sister kept flashing in his mind. Brother, I want to eat rice cake. Can you buy it for me? With her hair in a ponytail, pure eyes and a weak voice, the young Yi Ling kept following behind Yi Xian. She held her brother's hand tightly and didn't let go. The scene changed and the thoughts returned. Yi Xian's eyes were tightly closed. He didn't expect that after he disappeared for 4 years, the sister who used to rely on him the most would no longer recognize him. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. His voice was bitter. Ling, you really don't recognize me? At this time, Yi Ling's footsteps stopped. Her body seemed to be stiff. After a few breaths, she slowly turned to look at Yi Xian. You came back alive. Your illness is cured. But 4 years ago, when you left without saying goodbye, do you know how we got through these 4 years? Like a flash flood, like a tidal wave, Yi Ling's voice was hoarse as she roared. It was as if she wanted to vent all the resentment she had accumulated over the years. Clang! The metal door was violently flung open by Yi Ling. The loud sound of the collision echoed in the night. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. His mind was extremely agitated. That year, in order to treat his illness, the family sold everything that could be sold. One mother with 2 children. Yi Xian didn't need to think to know that in the past 4 years, the family had encountered great difficulties. Xianer, don't mind her. Your sister, Mom, you don't need to say anymore. It's all my fault. Don't blame her. Really don't blame her. Yi Xian said bitterly. He supported Mother Yi as they slowly walked back home. But in his heart he had already made some decisions. At home, Mother Yi was going to cook. but Yixian let her rest in the house. He then went into the kitchen, picked up the apron and began to make dinner. The four walls of the house were bare, and the food was bland. Apart from a pot of white rice, there was no meat at all on the dining table. When Yixian saw the bottom of the rice jar, he already knew how poor the family was. At the dining table, Mother Yi went to ask Yi Ling-er to eat, but did not get any response. Clearly Yi Ling-er did not want to see Yixian. Thus Mother Yi had no choice but to give up. "Xian-er, have a bite first. I'll make your favorite braised carp tomorrow," Mother Yi said as she picked up the vegetables on the plate and placed them in Yixian's bowl. Yixian ate the food in his bowl silently. A warmth that he had never experienced in the past 4 years grew in his heart. He ate very seriously because he was finally reunited with his family. "Mom, where's little brother?" After putting down the bowl and chopsticks, Yixian finally remembered the matter. Ever since he stepped into the house, Yi Ling-er had already returned home, but Yi Ping was nowhere to be seen. Hearing Yixian's question, Mother Yi knew that she couldn't beat around the bush. She forced a smile and said, "Your brother is doing very well now. He was brought back to the Yi family 3 years ago." Chapter 8. Yixian's face suddenly turned cold, and there was a look of bewilderment in his eyes. Han Chuyun was also Yixian's mother. In the past, she was just a maidservant of the Yi family who was in charge of taking care of the third young master of the Yi family. During a hangover, Han Chuyun lost her virginity. When old Mr. Yi found out about it, Han Chuyun's belly slowly swelled. Only then did he realize that Han Chuyun was pregnant with the Yi family's flesh and blood. He had no choice but to take Han Chuyun in as his concubine. In the next 2 years she gave birth to twins, Yi Ling-er and Yi Ping. Logically speaking, even though Han Chuyun was born a maidservant, she would not have to worry about food and clothing in the future, because she was pregnant with the Yi family's flesh and blood. However, in these large families there was a saying that there were couples of equal social status. Yixian's biological father married another family's beloved daughter. How could the other party tolerate them? When Yixian was 5 years old, the Yi family casually found a reason to chase him and his mother out of the family for 4 years. Even 4 years ago, when Yixian was terminally ill and on the verge of death, his heartless father did not come to see him. Yixian stayed silent for a while before saying to his mother bluntly, "With that woman in the Yi family, how can they tolerate Yi Ping?" Facing Yixian's question, Mrs. Yi laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "That man and she have no children." After Mrs. Yi said that, Yixian instantly understood. The Yi family was a large family in capital city and old Mr. Yi had 3 sons who should be very old now. If his heartless father did not have any children, he would definitely be at a disadvantage in the battle for the position of the head of the family in the future. At the thought of this, Yixian had already understood the cause and effect. "Mother, has Yi Ping come back to see you all these years?" After saying that, Yixian regretted a little. If Yi Ping had really come back to see his mother, how could the family be so poor? Just as Yixian expected, Yixian's mother laughed bitterly. This made Yixian's heart feel as if it was being pricked by needles. He then said softly, "Mom, don't worry. After a while, I will go to the capital to bring my brother back. At that time we will be able to reunite as a family." Hearing Yixian's words, Yixian's mother's face changed as fear flashed through her eyes. She hurriedly advised Yixian, "Xian-er, forget it. We can't afford to offend the Yi clan. You mustn't go." "Can't afford to offend him?" Yixian muttered to himself. A blood-red light flashed in his eyes. Even if the other party was an ancient martial arts aristocratic family, Yixian would still be able to annihilate them with a single finger, let alone the fact that the Yi clan was a large clan in the capital. However, Yixian didn't show this emotion in front of Yi Mu. He didn't want Yi Mu to worry about him. Wang! A ripple bloomed in the void as an inexplicable space opened up. 2 white elixirs quietly appeared in Yixian's hands. Naturally, Yi Mu didn't notice this phenomenon. "Mother, this is the elixir that the eccentric gave me. It has the effect of prolonging one's life. If you and sister take it, it will be very beneficial to your body," Yixian said as he handed the elixirs to Yi Mu. Good. Xian-er is still so filial. Yi Mu didn't ask for the name of the elixir and directly consumed it. It was obvious that she had unconditional trust in her son. Yun Spirit Pill. This was the name of the elixir. It was refined from various spiritual essences and the blood essence of strange beasts. If consumed, it could prolong one's life and make one immune to all diseases. It could even restore one's youthful vitality. To Yixian, this kind of elixir was only the lowest grade item in the storage space. It wasn't that Yixian was stingy with his mother, but the elixir was too strong for her to bear. At this time it was already late at night. Yimu tidied up a room for Yixian to stay in and then returned to her own room. The night light was like water, dotted with stars. Yixian stood in the room, looking at the bright moon and stars through the window eaves. His thoughts drifted. His mother's aged face and his sister's hoarse reprimand echoed in Yixian's mind. He knew what he had to do to change everything in front of him. I need money. This is the most basic thing. Yixian whispered and frowned. In the Bloodsea battlefield, Yixian was known as the Immortal Heavenly Lord. The so-called wealth was just a joke to him. In that door, only the strong were respected. If you wanted something, you could rob, kill, and take it. However, Yixian couldn't do this when he returned to the mortal world. It wasn't that he had any scruples, but he just wanted to take good care of his family. In the future, he would have to solve the problem of his cultivation being unable to advance. During this time, he didn't want to attract anyone's attention. However, as a terrifying immortal cultivator, could Yixian really not attract the attention of the world as he thought? Time passed quickly. Yixian racked his brains. How could he earn the first sum of money? Sell elixirs? Yixian immediately rejected this idea. Not to mention whether or not people would believe in this kind of thing. If he caused a commotion in the world, he would only be looking for trouble. Yixian also thought of teaching his mother and sister the art of immortal cultivation, but there was no spiritual energy in the world. It was just a delusion. The cultivation he had now was not something that could be replicated. Suppressing his troubled mind, Yixian decided to go out for a walk tomorrow. He didn't believe that with his identity as an immortal cultivator, it would be difficult for him to earn some money in the mortal world. Yixian sat cross-legged and operated the immortal scripture. Although his cultivation couldn't advance, he still persevered, hoping to see a glimmer of light on the path of cultivation. Li family's mansion. Li Zongshan's face was gloomy as he sat on a luxurious sofa. Opposite him was a middle-aged man in his 40s. This man had copper skin and a pair of triangular eyes that flashed with an ominous light. One could tell at a glance that he wasn't a good person. Old dragon, you said that you would withdraw from the Beichuan gang and have nothing to do with us. Now you want to borrow the Beichuan gang's power. Don't you think it's a bit too childish? Wu Jun, I was the one who brought you into the gang back then. You being able to sit on the boss's position is also partly due to me. Let's get straight to the point. What do you want? Li Zongshan narrowed his eyes. 80%. 80% of your Li family's wealth. Wu Jun demanded an exorbitant price, his face flashing with confidence. You really dare to dream. That's a total of 300 million Chinese currency. Li Zongshan's face flushed red as he growled at Wu Jun. Looking at Li Zongshan's flushed face, Wu Jun laughed coldly and said, Old dragon, this isn't much at all. You should know that the person who killed your children is not an ordinary person. Other than an ancient warrior, there's no other possibility. Even though I'm in charge of the Beichuan gang, if the other party is a ruthless person, my Beichuan gang will have to pay a price. Wu Jun, you're an ancient warrior and a covert power expert. The entire Beichuan gang is one of the 3 major gangs in Jiangnan City. Even if the other party is an ancient warrior, he's at most a covert power expert like you. How can he be a match for the Beichuan gang? You want 80% of my Li family's wealth. Isn't that a bit too much? Li Zongshan said hatefully. Obviously, he couldn't accept Wu Jun's conditions. Chapter 9. Humph, the Li family has no descendants. With your current physical condition, you can't even conceive a child. Since you want to take the money into your coffin, it's up to you. Wu Jun snorted and walked out of the door. Looking at Wu Jun's back, Li Zongshan clenched his fists but then loosened them quietly. As Wu Jun said, he had no descendants. The money was just a number to him. Okay, I promise you. Li Zongshan's powerless voice made Wu Jun smile with satisfaction. He returned to Li Zongshan's side. According to our investigation, The Li family hasn't offended anyone recently. It's just that your children went to Jiangnan Hospital many times to find trouble with a woman named Xia Qiu. Wu Jun said in a low voice. Huh? You mean this Xia Qiu? Wu Jun interrupted Li Zongshan before he could finish. He took out several photos and threw them on the table. No, it's not this woman named Xia Qiu. These are the photos taken from Jiangnan Hospital's surveillance camera. Look at this young man. As Wu Jun finished speaking, Li Zongshan looked at the photos and saw that it was Yi Xian. This person appeared at Jiangnan Hospital at 4:10 in the afternoan, and at Zhanghai Bridge at 4:20 in the afternoon. In just 10 minutes he could appear in two different places. Wu Jun paused for a moment and continued. The Zhanghai Bridge is only one street away from the scene where your children were killed. Moreover, our people asked the nurses on duty and found out that this young man is Xia Qiu's nephew. Although the Beichuan gang was one of the three major gangs in Jiangnan City, their efficiency was top-notch. In just a few days they had already found Yi Xian. It's definitely him. Looking at Yi Xian in the photos, Li Zongshan's eyes were bloodshot and filled with murderous intent. Calming his surging emotions, Li Zongshan looked up at Wu Jun and said in a low voice, "It seems that you knew I was looking for you. Old dragon, you must be joking." After all, the appearance of an ancient warrior in Jiangnan City naturally alerted us. I just didn't expect you to be involved. Wu Jun smiled. What are you going to do now? Li Zongshan asked. This person is very interesting. I want to meet him. Just wait for my news. After Wu Jun said this, he smiled and walked out of the Li family's mansion. Looking at Wu Jun's back, Li Zongshan was slightly gloomy. He believed that Wu Jun would never fail. After all, there were not many ancient warriors in Jiangnan City, and Wu Jun was definitely in the top 10. At the same time, in the hanging mirror department of Jiangnan City, Lu Jundai furrowed her brows. There were a few photos on the table, and one of them was Yi Xian. Why can't we find out where this guy came from? Lu Jundai kept banging on the table. Since the Beichuan gang was able to find Yi Xian, as the head constable of the Jiangnan Hanging Mirror Department, Lu Jundai was no pushover. However, Lu Jundai kept checking the national population records, but she could not match up to Yi Xian at all. It was as if there was no such person in the world. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the office door. As the door was pushed open, Liang Chenggu slowly walked in. Behind him was a muscular young man and a little girl around the age of 8 or 9. Constable Lu, you've worked hard these days. This case will be handed over to the Wu-En department. You don't have to interfere. Liang Chenggu said. Wu-En department? Lu Jundai was stunned. She looked at the young man and the girl, and her eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. Others might not know what kind of department the Wu-En department was, but as the daughter of the Yi family, she knew that the Wu-En department was extremely mysterious. They specialized in handling cases that ordinary people could not understand. However, after being a police officer for so many years, this was the first time Lu Jundai had seen someone from the Wu-En department. This made her look at them carefully. Hello, Constable Lu. My name is Tai Li, and this is my partner Ling Long. From today onwards, this case will be handed over to us. Please tell us the details. Tai Li was wearing a short-sleeved shirt. His bronze skin gave people a feeling of strength, and his voice was a little rough. The little girl beside him blinked her eyes and looked curiously at Lu Jundai. She gave people a feeling of cuteness. Of course, Lu Jundai did not treat this little girl as an ordinary person. After all, the people from the Wu-En department were not simple. Since the Wu-En department was here, Lu Jundai directly handed over the case to the two of them. The rest would be handled by the Wu-En department. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight fell on Yi Xian's body, he slowly opened his eyes. After a night of cultivation, his cultivation had only stabilized a little. There was still no progress. This made him sigh helplessly. He got up and walked out of the house. The sound of Mama Yi cooking came from the kitchen. Yi Ling-er was playing with her phone on the table. When she saw Yi Xian, her face turned cold and she turned around. Obviously, she did not want to talk to Yi Xian. Yi Xian inwardly sighed. He could only slowly improve the relationship between the siblings. Walking in front of Yi Ling-er, Yi Xian said softly, "Little sister, are you going to school?" Unfortunately, Yi Ling-er did not respond to Yi Xian's question. Instead, she said to Mama Yi, who was in the kitchen, "Mom, I'm going to school for breakfast. I might not be back tonight." Yi Ling picked up her bag and walked out of the house. She did not even look at Yi Xian. At this time, Yi Xian frowned. Looking at Yi Ling back, a deep look flashed across his eyes. It was not Yi Ling-er's attitude that made him unhappy. It was because before his little sister left, she told Mama Yi that she might not be home tonight. She was only 16 this year. At such a young age, where would she go at night? "Mom is old. I'm always worried about her," but at some point Mama Yi walked out of the kitchen with food in her hands. Her face was filled with worry. It was obvious that she did not have the strength to care about her daughter. Hearing Mama Ye's worried words, Yi Xian was silent for a while. Then he smiled and said, "Mom, don't worry. Since I'm back, I will take good care of her." The mother and son ate a simple breakfast. During this time, Yi Xian also asked about the school his little sister was at. He wanted to know more about the changes his little sister had undergone over the years. When breakfast was over, Mama Yi also had to go to work. Before she left, she told Yi Xian to stay at home for the time being. She did not mention a word about letting Yi Xian go out to work. Clearly, Mama Yi loved her son dearly. After not seeing him for so many years, how could she bear to see her son bear the burden of the family just after he came home? As his mother and little sister left the house, Yi Xian's breath, which was like a spring breeze, gradually changed. His temperament also began to become cold. Ever since he returned home yesterday, Yi Xian had been restraining his aura. In the past 4 years, tens of millions of creatures had died by his hands. He had long since abandoned his so-called weak heart. Only when he was with Mother Yi would the ice-cold aura on his body disappear. "It's time to go out for a walk," Yi Xian said softly. When he stepped out, ripples appeared in the air and he disappeared from the house. Chapter 10. Guanyin Temple, Jiangnan City. It was bustling and noisy. Hawkers on both sides of the street were selling their goods. Many fortune-tellers were setting up stalls to tell fortunes, which made the front of the Guanyin Temple very lively. Yi Xian, in a black robe and gray hair, sat in front of a quaint square table. There was nothing else. If it were not for the word fortune-telling written on the white paper on the table, no one would think that Yi Xian was a fortune-teller. Yes, Yi Xian was a fortune-teller at the moment. Birth, old age, illness and death, natural disasters and unexpected disasters, these were the lives of mortals. Although Yi Xian could not predict the past and future, as a cultivator, he had some knowledge of the qi reading technique. To make money and improve the life of his family, this was the reason why Yi Xian condescended to become a fortune-teller. Yi Xian did not open his business from early morning to noon. He was not in a hurry. Patience was not something that Yi Xian lacked. However, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the Guanyin Temple, which made many fortune-tellers who made a living looking at Yi Xian coldly. They secretly disdained Yi Xian's outfit. Yi Xian naturally did not care about other people's eyes. He lowered his eyes and quietly waited for the person he was waiting for to appear. Suddenly, a burst of noise made Yi Xian look at the source of the noise. A tall woman came out of the Guanyin Temple. The woman's eyebrows were picturesque, and her makeup was extremely delicate. Her clothes were expensive and she was about 20 years old. Behind her were several men in black who looked like bodyguards. However, this woman's brows were tightly knitted, as if she had something on her mind. She did not pay any attention to the fortune-tellers on both sides of the street. The bodyguards beside her even fiercely glared at these fortune-tellers. Only then did they stop the noise from their mouths. "That's her." Yi Xian nodded slowly with satisfaction in his eyes. At this time, Zhuo Junting was distraught. Her grandfather was sick and had been in a coma for half a month. According to the doctor's diagnosis, her grandfather's body was gradually weakening. She was afraid that it wouldn't be long before. Zhuo Junting didn't dare to think any further. If Grandpa Gua died, the entire Zhuo clan would fall into chaos. Although she had invited famous doctors from home and abroad, none of them could diagnose her grandfather's illness. In desperation, she could only place her hopes on the illusory gods. This was also the reason why she appeared at the Guanyin Temple. Haunted by ghosts, in less than 3 days your loved ones will die. Suddenly, an abrupt voice rang out beside Zhuo Junting's ear, causing her to be startled. Then, her expression changed drastically as she abruptly looked towards the source of the voice. What did you mean when you said you were haunted by ghosts? She quickly walked up to Yixian and asked coldly. Yixian could tell at a glance that there was a faint trace of yin qi on Zhuo Junting's body. It was obvious that there was a ghost haunting her family. Since her body was fine, there must be someone in her family who was possessed by a ghost. Your loved ones are possessed by ghosts and their vitality is constantly being devoured. If you want to save them, I have a talisman here. All you need to do is stick it between their eyebrows and it will save their life. Yixian said coldly. A jade talisman suddenly appeared in his hand, and he placed it on the table. Zhuo Junting was stunned when she saw the jade talisman on the table. She looked at Yixian with suspicion in her eyes. How much do you want for this jade talisman? Zhuo Junting's expression darkened. 1 million. Yixian directly stated the price. Whoa! As Yixian stated the price, there was an uproar around. Is this kid crazy? Does he really think she's that easy to trick? This kid really doesn't want to live anymore. One look at this lady and I can tell she's either rich or noble. I'm afraid he'll be in for it later. The peddlers and fortune-tellers on both sides of the street had already noticed this scene. All kinds of disdainful laughter could be heard. At this time, Zhuo Junting's expression was extremely ugly. Obviously, she also regarded Yixian in front of her as a charlatan. The bodyguard next to her looked at Yixian with hostility. Let's go. Zhuo Junting's expression was cold. She ordered the bodyguard to turn and leave. Yixian silently watched Zhuo Junting leave. He had no intention of stopping her because he believed that this woman would come back. Sure enough, Zhuo Junting turned back after taking a dozen steps. Her eyes were filled with a complicated expression. There's 1 million in this card. The last 6 digits of the card number are the password. Zhuo Junting directly took out a gold card and threw it on the table. This scene caused the surrounding crowd to be stunned. They felt like they were in a dream. Although Zhuo Junting treated Yixian as a charlatan, the fact that he could say something about her family gave her a glimmer of hope. She was already at the end of the road. She would not let go of even the slightest bit of hope. 1 million was just a drop in the ocean for her. Just as Zhuo Junting was about to take the jade talisman and leave, Yixian's voice sounded at the right time. 1 million just now, 2 million now. Boom! The surrounding crowd woke up from their daze. All kinds of curses were heard. Motherfucker, aren't you too shameless? Insatiable, insatiable. He already cheated her of 1 million and he's still so insatiable. If it were me, I'd give him a slap and let him know how powerful I am. At this time, Zhuo Junting gritted her teeth. She looked at Yixian as if she wanted to eat him alive. Her pair of delicate fists were clenched. Obviously, her anger had risen to the extreme. Miss, this man is a charlatan. Let me show him who's the boss. The bodyguard beside her was filled with righteous indignation. He rubbed his fists and was ready to beat Yixian up. Okay, here you go. Before the bodyguard could do anything, Zhuo Junting took out another gold card and threw it to Yixian. Then, she picked up the jade talisman on the table and turned to leave. But after a few steps, she suddenly turned back and sneered at Yixian. If your jade talisman is fake, I can find you even if I have to turn Jiangnan City upside down. With 2 million in hand, Yixian did not take Zhuo Junting's threat to heart. He got up and left directly. This made Zhuo Junting really treat him as a charlatan. How could he just turn around and leave after taking the money? Obviously, the other party had a guilty conscience. Miss, can I help you get him back? The bodyguard whispered. Looking at Yixian's back, Zhuo Junting was embarrassed and angry. Then she shook her head and said, no need. Let's go home. In the center of Jiangnan City, Yixian walked on the bustling street. The place he was heading to was Jinhua Luxury Shopping Mall. Yixian did not ask for much in exchange for 2 million xia currency from Zhuo Junting with a piece of jade talisman. One had to know that the jade talisman contained his own blood fiendish aura. Not to mention being possessed by a ghost, even a ghost general level ghost would be annihilated into dregs. Compared to a mere 2 million, Yixian was at a disadvantage. When Junting discovered the use of this jade talisman, she would probably feel deeply fortunate to have met Yixian. Chapter 11. Jinhua Luxury Shopping Mall. Yixian first entered a men's clothing store. He changed out of his black ancient robe and picked out a few sets of clothes. Under the passionate gaze of the beautiful salesperson, Yixian swiped his card and left, ignoring the small note that the salesperson secretly slipped him. Shopping, a lot of shopping. Yixian went on a shopping spree from women's clothing to all kinds of goods. When he came out of Jinhua Shopping Mall, he had spent a total of 300,000 Huaxia dollars. Yixian couldn't help but sigh. He had only bought some clothes and had actually spent 300,000. If it were him 4 years ago, he wouldn't even dare to think about it. Yixian headed straight home with a large number of goods in his hands. As for buying a house for his mother and sister to change their environment, he didn't consider it for the time being. It wasn't because of anything else, but because Yixian had inquired about the price of the house. In a first-tier city like Jiangnan, a house in the city center would cost at least a few million. Obviously, Yixian didn't have enough money. Moreover, since Yixian was planning to improve his family's living conditions, he naturally wouldn't consider buying an ordinary house. The worst would be a villa, and the money needed would probably start at least in the tens of millions. Jiangnan Hospital. Just as Zhuo Junting arrived at the intensive care unit, she saw that the outside of the ward was already filled with people from the Zhuo family. Junting, although our Zhuo family is rich, you're too much. How could you let a charlatan cheat you out of 2 million to buy a useless jade talisman? If this were to spread, wouldn't we be ridiculed by others? Zhuo Wenbin scolded Zhuo Junting with a gloomy expression. Ting, it's not that I want to nag you, but now that the old master is critically ill, all the families are eyeing our Zhuo family. It's better if you don't do such things in the future. A middle-aged upper-class lady said with hidden meaning. Humph. Zhuo Wenshan snorted and said, Second brother, second sister-in-law, have you said enough? The old master isn't dead yet. It's not up to you to teach Ting a lesson. Big brother, Ting is your daughter. It's not right for you to protect her like this. Moreover, before the old master fell into a coma, he didn't say that he would pass the position of the family head to you. Zhuo Wenbin sneered again and again, appearing to have nothing to fear. Big brother, second brother, the old master is critically ill now. Why are you arguing over such a trivial matter? Zhuo Meiyun scolded her two brothers directly. Ting, what's done is done. Just be careful next time. Zhuo Meiyun comforted Zhuo Junting. At this time Jun Ting frowned. It was obvious that the bodyguard had told the family about her matter, which led to this dispute. But obviously this wasn't important. Ever since Grandpa fell into a coma, second uncle seemed to have changed into a different person. He had the intention to compete with father for the position of family head. This was not the first time he had used this as a pretext to make a fuss. Creak. The intensive care unit was pushed open, and several doctors and nurses walked out of the room, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Academician Bai, how is my old master now? Zhuo Wenshan walked quickly to greet them, followed by the other members of the Zhuo family. If Yixian were present at this time, he would definitely recognize that the doctor walking in front was Director Bai of Jiangnan Hospital. Director Bai sighed and said with shame, We've tried our best. Please restrain your grief. You can go in and take a last look at old Master Zhuo. The sudden bad news directly made Jun Ting's face turn pale. She even staggered into the intensive care unit. The three siblings of the Zhuo family were stunned at first, but they also quickly walked into the ward. In the intensive care unit, the old master of the Zhuo family had a haggard face and a thin body. The medical equipment in front of him beeped, and his heart beat every 5 seconds. Obviously, it wouldn't be long before the old master of the Zhuo family passed away. Dad. As the members of the Zhuo family poured in, a few sorrowful cries were heard. Jun Ting bit her lips and stared blankly at the grandfather who had loved her the most since she was a child. A lot of tears appeared in her eyes. Grandpa! Are you really going to leave Junting? Jun Ting choked with sobs and kept shaking the old master's arm. However, no matter how she called, the old master didn't respond at all. Jun Ting's father and Jun Meiyun looked sad, while Jun Bin had a complicated look in his eyes. However, he hid it very well. When the Zhuo family was immersed in sorrow, Jun Ting's action suddenly made the Zhuo family's expressions change. Ting, what are you doing? The father Zhuo Wenshan asked in surprise. Junting, now is not the time for you to be fooling around. The second uncle Zhuo Wenbin scolded coldly. Ting Ting, quickly take that thing away from your grandfather's forehead. Zhuo Meiyun's expression was also a little unfriendly. As the saying goes, when a patient is in a desperate situation, Junting didn't care whether Yixian was a liar or not. She directly took out the jade talisman that Yixian sold and quickly put it on the old master's forehead. Although Junting knew that this couldn't save her grandfather's life, she wouldn't let go even if it was the last glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was also some comfort she was seeking in her heart. Just as the father Zhuo Wenshan was about to step forward to stop his daughter's nonsense, what happened next shocked the Zhuo family and made them all freeze in place. Ah! It sounded like the cry of an owl or the wail of a ghost. An ear-piercing scream came from old Master Zhuo's body. The jade talisman was emitting a blood-red light, enveloping old Master Zhuo's body. Buzz! The jade talisman moved without any wind and slowly rose into the air. A pitch-black ghost shadow escaped from old Master Zhuo's body and madly escaped out of the window. Crack! The jade talisman's blood-red light shone brightly and directly enveloped the void, causing an explosion in the void. A blood-red thunderbolt struck out and destroyed the ghost's shadow into ashes. The jade talisman suspended in the air also turned into a pile of white powder at this moment. At the same time, in a dark room in Jiangnan City, a black-robed man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and his aura instantly weakened. No, impossible. Who killed my ghost baby? Who is he? The black-robed man said with a trembling voice. Although he was also seriously injured due to the influence of his aura, the death of the ghost baby shocked him even more. In the intensive care unit of Jiangnan Hospital, the vision had disappeared. But the Zhuo family seemed to be still in a dream and couldn't come to their senses for a long time. It wasn't until old Master Zhuo groaned weakly that the Zhuo family woke up from the shock. Grandpa! Grandpa! Are you awake? Junting didn't care about the strange vision just now and hurried to old Master Zhuo's bedside. Dad, are you all right? The children of the Zhuo family hurried to him, each of their faces filled with excitement. I almost died. Unfortunately, I was saved by an expert. That's why I survived, old Master Zhuo said weakly. Even though he was unconscious, he could still hear everything that was happening outside. It was just that he could not move or speak. Chapter 12. These days, old Master Zhuo had been fighting against the ghost baby, until he was almost completely devoured by it. Just when he thought he was going to die, he felt a cold touch between his eyebrows. The ghost baby seemed to be seriously injured and escaped from his body. Although he didn't know what happened, he knew that someone must be helping him from the outside. Ting Ting, who saved Grandpa? Old Master Zhuo ignored his weak body and quickly asked Zhuo Junting. At this moment, Zhuo Junting was also extremely shocked. She never thought that Yixian wasn't a liar. Sure enough, it was as the other party had said. Her grandfather was actually haunted by a ghost, and it was all thanks to his jade talisman. Otherwise, her grandfather would have left her. Junting quickly recounted how she got to know Yixian. She even told the old man about the miraculous incident just now, causing the people in the ward to be extremely shocked. 2 million. A mere 2 million in exchange for this old man's life? After listening to Zhuo Junting's narration, old Master Zhuo muttered to himself. Soon he came back to his senses and said solemnly, no matter what, no matter the price, we must find this expert. Grandpa must thank him in person. As the head of the Zhuo family, old Master Zhuo deeply understood that since someone wanted to use a ghost to harm him, there would be a second time. Thanking this expert in person was true, but the real purpose was to find this expert and ask him to help him find the real culprit behind the scenes. What happened next was very simple. Old Master Zhuo recovered and was discharged from the hospital. This kind of incredible thing naturally shocked Dean Bai. However, no matter how he asked, the Zhuo family didn't tell the truth. They just used a simple reason to evade him. Zhuo Junting returned to the Guanyin temple again. But she couldn't find Yixian. She even asked the surrounding peddlers, but she didn't get any useful information. Several days passed. Zhuo Junting came to the Guanyin temple every day. But Yixian seemed to have disappeared from the world and never appeared in her sight again. Looking at the place where Yixian used to set up his stall, Zhuo Junting bit her lips and whispered, will you really not appear again? The sun was setting, the afterglow of the setting sun. When Yixian returned home, he took out the goods he bought from the storage space and put them on the table. Then he waited patiently for Yimu to come back from work. According to her mother, she is now working as a cleaner in a hotel. Although Yixian asked Yimu to quit her job, her mother still insisted on going to work. Yixian knew in his heart that he had just returned home. In his mother's eyes, there was no job. If she quit her job, who would support the family? But today Yixian decided that no matter what, he would let Yimu quit her job, because the money in his hands could also make his mother and sister live a better life, so that they wouldn't have to worry about living. Time passed quickly. When night fell, there was a sound of the door opening. Yimu carried a vegetable bag in her hand and dragged her tired body into the house. When she saw Yixian, the tiredness on Yimu's face was swept away and she glowed with joy. Although the Yun Spirit Pill has been taken by Yixian, the Yun Spirit Pill is a kind of gradual medicinal pill. After all, Yimu is just a mortal. Although Yixian has the kind of medicinal pill that can restore one's youth overnight, it will only cause unnecessary hidden diseases to Yimu. Mom, you are tired. I'll get you a glass of water. Yixian quickly walked over to Mother Yi and took the item from her hand. Then he went to the kitchen to pour a cup of water. However, when Yixian returned, he saw Mother Yi staring blankly at the goods he'd bought. Yimu was not a woman without knowledge. She used to be a maid of the Yi family in the capital. Her vision was also different from ordinary people. When she saw the dazzling lineup of goods on the table, how could she not see the value? Every item on the table was an international brand, and each of them was worth tens of thousands of yuan. Yimu silently calculated that the items on the table alone were worth hundreds of thousands. Jin, where did you get the money? Yimu's eyes had a trace of worry, and even her voice had a trace of trembling. Looking at his mother's worried face, Yixian directly put 2 gold cards on the table and took out the speech he had already prepared. He said, Mom, when I came back, that strange man gave me a few antiques. I went to the antique market today and sold some money. There are 1.7 million yuan in these 2 cards. Take it first when you have money in the future. Before Yixian finished speaking, Yimu's eyes slowly flowed down 2 lines of tears, which directly made Yixian's heart clench, and the fabricated speech in his mouth could not continue. Xianer, how long are you going to lie to me? No one knew a son better than his mother. Although she had not seen Yixian for 4 years, Yixian was her flesh and blood. Although Yixian had hidden his murderous nature when he came home, how could Yimu's mother not feel the inadvertent aura of a superior? Looking at his mother's teary eyes, Yixian suddenly came to a realization, and a trace of a bitter smile appeared on his face. After all, this was his mother, and also the person closest to him. How could she not feel the change in him? Mom, your son assures you that this money was very clean, and your son did not violate the law. Please believe me. Yixian half knelt in front of Yimu with an extremely solemn expression on his face. In these 4 years, Yixian had made a name for himself in the Blood Sea battlefield due to his decisiveness in killing, ruthlessness. He was even respectfully called the Undying Heavenly Lord by all kinds of creatures. He had long since tempered his temperament to be extremely cold, but towards his mother, Yixian had great respect in his heart. Yixian was a filial person, and even after 4 years of living in the Blood Sea, he had not changed in the slightest. Xianer, I don't know what you've been through these years, but I don't want to lose you again. In the future, I won't ask about your matters anymore. As long as you take good care of yourself, I will be satisfied. Yimu's mother smiled through her tears. Yimu's mother was not an ignorant old woman. Ever since Yixian returned, she had noticed many strange things. For example, when mother and son met in the North Mountain Public Cemetery, why did the weather change? Why was Yixian's frail body able to lift a strong man with one hand? All these things told her that her son was not an ordinary person. In these 4 years, he must have had some unspeakable secret. However, Yimu's mother did not want to ask Yixian because her son had grown up and had his own ideas. Too much interference might become a burden to Yixian. Mother, there are some things that I can't tell you, but please don't worry. Our days will get better and better. Back then, when you and I were chased out of the Yi clan, although you didn't say anything, I know that you have resentment in your heart. Yixian paused at this point, and his expression became slightly gloomy. He continued, "Don't worry, I will take revenge for all the humiliation you suffered back then. The so-called Yi clan is nothing but a bunch of ants in my eyes." An uncontrollable killing intent quietly spread out from Yixian's body. A blood-red light flickered in Yixian's eyes. Clearly, Yixian's heart had long since been filled with killing intent, but he had never revealed it in front of Yimu's mother. Chapter 13. Yixian's mother could feel the murderous aura on Yixian's body, which made her extremely frightened. She hurriedly tried to dissuade him, saying, "What mother has suffered is nothing. Even if there is some resentment, it has already dissipated. As long as we can reunite as a family, mother will be satisfied." Listening to his mother's words of dissuasion, Yixian hurriedly restrained his murderous aura, but he did not promise his mother. Obviously, he had to seek justice for his mother for what happened in the past. The mother and son chatted for a while. Then Yixian's mother went into the kitchen and made Yixian a dish of braised carp and a few other dishes. When the food was served, the sky outside was completely dark. "Xianer, don't wait. Maybe your sister won't come back today. Let's eat first." Yixian's mother forced a smile and put a piece of fish in Yixian's bowl. However, the worry in her eyes was clearly seen by Yixian. The food in the bowl was not touched. Yixian smiled and said, "Mother, wait at home. I will go to the school to pick up my sister. It won't take long." After saying this, Yixian did not wait for his mother to stop him. He directly got up and walked out of the house. When Yixian's mother chased after him, there was no sign of Yixian outside. Above the clouds in the void, Yixian walked slowly. At this moment, Yixian's expression was ice-cold. It was obvious that he wasn't in a good mood when his little sister didn't return at night. When Yixian was in a bad mood, he would kill. This was a habit that he'd developed in the Bloodsea battlefield for the past 4 years. Lanchi High School was a third-rate high school. You could not see any students wearing school uniforms. This high school was filled with all kinds of gangsters and delinquent girls. It was also known as one of the worst high schools in Jiangnan City. It was now 8 o'clock in the evening, and the school was already empty. However, in front of the school gate there were all kinds of private cars parked there. From time to time, there were gorgeously dressed girls entering the private cars and leaving. Yixian quietly appeared in front of the school gate without attracting anyone's attention. Looking at the scene in front of the school gate, Yixian's expression turned cold. A few colorful gangsters were smoking cigarettes, and a few scantily clad girls were laughing and fooling around. From time to time, a middle-aged uncle would get out of a private car and chat with some delinquent girls. Even a fool could tell what they were talking about. "My little sister attends such a school?" Yixian's voice was cold and his face was extremely gloomy. Yixian strolled towards the thugs in front of him. When he arrived in front of them, the thugs noticed Yixian's presence. "Hey kid, I've never seen you before. You look so young. Could it be that you're also here to look for excitement?" A gangster with dyed blue hair laughed at Yixian, causing the other gangsters to roar with laughter. "Do you know a girl called Yilinger?" Yixian asked in a deep voice. "Yilinger?" The green-haired gangster was stunned. He then looked at Yixian carefully and said, "What's your relationship with her?" "I'm her brother." Yixian's voice was slightly cold. "Haha, godbrother? I didn't expect Yilinger to have a godbrother." The green-haired gangster smiled mischievously, completely unaware of the coldness in Yixian's eyes. "I'll ask you one more time, where is Yilinger right now?" Yixian strolled in front of the green-haired gangster, causing him to be stunned. Then anger appeared on his face. "How the hell are you talking to Lao Tzu like that, you?" The green-haired man wanted to boost his morale, but before he could finish his words, his vision blurred. A strong hand grabbed him by the neck and lifted him into the air in an instant. Yixian's 5 fingers slowly closed. His voice was even colder as he said, "Tell me where she is." Such a scene caused the other gangsters to be extremely shocked. They wanted to go up and help, but when they saw Yixian's cold eyes, they immediately scattered and fled. Obviously, these gangsters were also people who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Seeing Yixian lift the green-haired gangster up effortlessly, they were afraid that he was also a martial artist. How could they be a match for Yixian? Cough cough. "I'll talk." The green-haired gangster's face was red as he spat out a few words with great difficulty. This also caused Yixian to loosen his grip and let the gangster fall to the ground. Today is Yixian's birthday. Yilinger and a few other girls have already been picked up by Yixian. I heard that they are at night bar. The green-haired gangster quickly said, afraid that Yixian would beat him up. Brother who? Yixian muttered to himself. He then looked at the green-haired gangster and said, who is Brother who? Brother who is one of the leaders of the Beichuan gang. If you are really Yilinger's brother, I advise you not to look for her. When Brother who was mentioned, the green-haired gangster's face was filled with fear. Hearing the green-haired gangster's reminder, Yixian silently glanced at the gangster. This green-haired gangster was not a bad person. Otherwise he would not have warned him. Yixian did not know why the gangster became like this. Yixian once again learned the address of night bar from the green-haired gangster and directly walked towards it. Hey, are you really going to look for Yilinger? You will be beaten to death. Looking at Yixian's back, the green-haired gangster hesitated. However, he still shouted these words to Yixian. Learn how to be a good person. Remember to dye your hair back. Yixian's voice sounded out from afar, causing Azure Hair to be stunned. He didn't know that if it wasn't for his kind reminder, he would have long since become a cripple based on the few filthy words from before. Night bar. Heavy metal music filled every inch of the bar. Countless young men and women were crazily dancing on the dance floor. The DJ on the stage was shouting passionately. There were even two flirtatious women in bikinis dancing their bodies. Just as he entered the night bar, Yixian frowned. He did not like this kind of extremely noisy place. If it were not for finding his sister, he would not have appeared here. Sir, are you alone? A waiter quickly walked in front of Yixian and asked, I am Brother who's friend. Do you know where he is? As Yixian's voice fell, the waiter was startled. He carefully sized up Yixian. His eyes were filled with doubt. One must know that today was Brother who's birthday. Which of Brother who's friends were not fiendish? How could there be such a gentle young man? Although he was suspicious, the waiter still pointed the way for Yixian. This also allowed Yixian to walk towards Brother who's table. In table number 1, on a luxurious golden sofa, there were 10 or so bald men with fierce faces. Every one of them had tattoos of dragons and tigers on their bodies. The sound of wine glasses clinking could be heard from time to time. The leader had a fierce face. There were several scars on his shiny bald head, making people not dare to look him in the eye. 10 or so young girls sat beside him. A dazzling array of wine filled the table. Occasionally there would be girls making lewd sounds, causing waves of laughter. Yilinger, with her yellow hair and heavy makeup, sat beside Brother Hu. Her eyes were filled with deep worry. She did not think of this, but Brother Hu insisted that she accompany him. Chapter 14. Most importantly, Yixian had crippled one of Brother Hu's men when he returned home. If she didn't come, she was afraid she would bring trouble to her family. Yilinger naturally knew what would happen if she came. Brother Hu had been coveting her for a long time. Only because she had been feigning civility with him, she had not been defiled by him. No matter if it was for her mother or that despicable Yixian, Yilinger knew she had to be there. But in a situation like this, Brother Hu was clearly not going to let her go. This made Yilinger's mind tense, and she kept thinking of ways to deal with him. Drink. She kept drinking with Brother Hu. Yilinger's idea was simple. If she wanted to avoid this disaster, she could only get him drunk. Only then could she escape with her life. Unfortunately, after a few bottles of wine, Yilinger's head was dizzy. Brother Hu's expression did not change. This made Yilinger bite her lips. Her face was pale. She couldn't help but think, could it be that she really couldn't avoid this disaster today? I say, Yilinger, our Brother Hu has admired you for a long time. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to force you, he would have already done it with you. Tonight, no matter what, you can't leave. A big man with a tattoo of a green wolf on his body smelled of alcohol and loudly laughed at Yilinger. That's right, Ling. Even Brother Hu doesn't like women like us. If it were me, I would have already thrown myself into Brother Hu's arms. There was even a young girl who was sitting on the legs of a big man and constantly giggled at Yilinger. At this time, Brother Hu's face was red. looking at Yi Ling beside him, who was looking down. His eyes flashed with lust. Ling your brother broke my subordinate's arm. This is because I gave you face, so I didn't pursue the matter. If it were someone else, they would already be a dead man. As brother Hu spoke, he put his hand on Yi Ling shoulder. But Yi Ling calmly dodged. This made brother Hu's face change. He didn't think Yi Ling would still refuse to give in. Ling will remember brother Hu's feelings. Let me toast you. Yi Ling forced a smile. She picked up the wine cup on the table and drank it all in one gulp. Unfortunately, brother Hu didn't even raise his glass. After so many years in the underworld, how could he not see that Yi Ling didn't want to accompany him? I won't drink anymore, I'm a bit tired. Ling why don't you send me back to the hotel? Tiger's voice was a bit cold, and his fierce eyes stared straight at the girl in front of him. As brother Hu's voice fell, Yi Ling face instantly paled. She knew she could not avoid this. She bit her lips and said with a trembling voice, Brother Hu, it's too late today. I still have some things to do at home. How about I accompany you later? Bang! Suddenly brother Tiger stood up abruptly. The bottle in his hand shattered and fell to the ground. His expression was extremely ugly. Brat, I'm giving you face by sleeping with you. Do you really think that Lao Tzu is a kind person? Brother Hu tore off the last of his concealment. His ferocious voice rang through the entire table, causing his subordinates to stop laughing. They all looked at Yi Ling fiercely. After all, Yi Ling was only a girl. How could she have experienced such a scene? At this moment, there was only despair in her eyes. She knew she couldn't escape, and the thought of suicide rose in her heart. Motherfucker, originally Lao Tzu hoped that you would be willing. Looks like today Lao Tzu is going to force himself on you. Brother Hu didn't waste any more words. He directly grabbed at Yi Ling causing his subordinates to become even more excited. Facing brother Hu's actions, Yi Ling face paled. Her body continuously retreated, and she casually picked up an empty bottle. It was as if this was her last resort. It was also at this moment that Yi Ling eyes became absent-minded. She couldn't help but think of Yi Xian's figure. She clearly remembered that when she was in elementary school, whenever a senior student bullied her, Yi Xian as her older brother would stand up for her. There was even one time because of her, Yi Xian was beaten to a bloody pulp by a few senior students. At that time she tightly hugged Yi Xian and cried. She continuously wiped away his blood, but she was still comforted by Yi Xian in his arms. Brother, where are you? Her thoughts turned back. Yi Ling murmured in her sleep, and a mist appeared in her eyes. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded from the table at the right time. If you want to die, you can take another step forward. The sudden appearance of the voice startled brother Hu and his subordinates. They all turned around to look at the source of the voice. At this moment, the table's curtain was opened, and Yi Xian slowly walked in. However, his face was extremely gloomy. When Yi Xian appeared, Yi Ling was completely stunned. In just a few breaths of time, her face changed greatly. Her eyes were filled with great worry. She hysterically shouted at Yi Xian, Get out! Get out, I don't need you to care about me. Obviously, Yi Ling knew what kind of people brother Hu and his subordinates were. How could Yi Xian be their opponent? If Yi Xian was crippled, Yi Ling definitely did not want to see this happen. Kid, who are you? Brother Hu's eyes narrowed, and his voice was somewhat ferocious. She's my sister. I want to bring her home. At this moment, Yi Xian's gloomy face was no longer there. His voice was also calmer. However, if the creatures in the Bloodsea battlefield saw Yi Xian's appearance, they would probably scream. This was because Yi Xian in this state was the most terrifying existence. Your sister? Today, Lao Tzu wants to sleep with your sister. Where can you take her? Brother Hu sneered again and again. He directly pulled out a machete from behind the sofa. The cold light of the machete was abnormally dazzling. It was as if in the next moment it would cut down Yi Xian. The boss was ready to make his move. The rest of the subordinates also laughed maliciously. All kinds of knives appeared in their hands. They faintly looked like they were surrounding Yi Xian. Looking at this scene, Yi Ling turned pale with fright. She quickly walked in front of Brother Hu and forced a smile. Brother Hu, I beg you to let him go. I'll go with you tonight. Ha ha. After receiving Yi Ling-er's reply, Brother Hu laughed. Kid, did you hear that? Your sister has decided to go with me. You can get out now. How do you want to die? Yi Xian's voice was calm as he slowly walked towards Brother Hu. Looking at Yi Xian's figure getting closer and closer, Yi Ling-er's expression changed greatly. She could not understand why Yi Xian wanted to die like this. Could it be that he could not see the current situation? Friend, which gang do you belong to? Suddenly, without waiting for Yi Ling-er to stop Yi Xian's suicidal actions, Brother Hu's expression became vigilant. His voice also became cautious. And such a scene also made Yi Ling-er suddenly stunned. She could not understand why Brother Hu's attitude suddenly changed. He actually did not make a move against Yi Xian. What Yi Ling-er didn't know was that as a small leader of the Beichuan gang, although Brother Hu wasn't a big shot, he had been fighting in the underworld for many years. He knew better than anyone who should be provoked and who shouldn't be provoked. Chapter 15. Just now, Brother Tiger only treated Yi Xian as an ordinary person. However, as Yi Xian continued to walk towards him, a huge pressure came towards him. His entire body suddenly tensed up as a chill rose from his bones. It was as if there was a voice in the unseen world telling him that the person walking towards him was an extremely terrifying person who might take his life. Brother Tiger firmly believed in this feeling because every time he was in danger, this feeling had never been wrong and had saved his life several times. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not reply. When he arrived in front of Brother Tiger, he did not even look at him. He directly pulled Yi Ling-er's small hand and walked out of the booth. Such a scene made Yi Ling-er extremely confused. She allowed Yi Xian to pull her hand and walk out. From beginning to end, she did not come back to her senses. Brother Tiger's subordinates were even more astonished. With steel knives in their hands, they wanted to chase after Yi Xian. However, before they could do anything, Brother Tiger scolded them, causing them to stop in their tracks. Don't chase, let him go. Brother Tiger's voice trembled. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. Looking at Yi Xian's disappearing figure, his eyes were filled with extreme fear. Terrifying, too terrifying. This person's aura seemed to be even stronger than the gang leaders. Brother Tiger's mind was in turmoil as this thought appeared in his mind. Outside the night bar, a gust of cold wind blew, causing Yi Ling-er to wake up from her astonishment. She instantly pulled her hand out of Yi Xian's hand and looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. Mom is waiting for you at home. You go home first. Yi Xian's voice was calm. He directly took off his coat and put it on Yi Ling-er's body. He casually hailed a taxi and without caring whether Yi Ling-er was willing or not, he directly pushed her into the car. His method was slightly violent. At this moment, looking at Yi Xian outside the car, Yi Ling-er bit her lips. Her eyes were filled with hesitation. When the taxi started, her voice trembled as she said, You're not going home? I still have some things to do, Yi Xian said calmly. The taxi quickly started and took Yi Ling-er back home. When the taxi disappeared from Yi Xian's eyes, a cruel smile appeared on his face. Woo! The wind and snow covered the sky, and the cold wind whistled. The originally clear weather suddenly turned gloomy, and Yi Xian slowly turned around, once again returning to the night bar. Nightshade bar. Loud heavy metal music, crazy dancing men and women. None of them knew that tonight would be a bloody feast. In the number 1 booth, Brother Hu continuously poured wine into his mouth in order to suppress the fear that Yi Xian brought to him. As for the girls in the booth, they were all chased away, leaving only a dozen or so of his subordinates by their side. Brother Hu, who was that brat just now? Why did you let him go? A subordinate asked. That's right, Brother Hu. If you didn't tell us not to move, we would have already crippled him, another subordinate said. Listening to his subordinate's words, Brother Hu slowly shook his head and said, What do you brats know? That young man is definitely not simple. At this point, Brother Hu's voice paused. His eyes were somewhat sinister as he continued, Although this person is not simple, there is no one in Jiangnan City that we, the Beichuan gang, do not dare to offend. Investigate, find out if this brat is Yi Ling-er's brother, and what his background is. Dong dong dong. Like the beating of a war drum, like the wailing of countless ghosts, a heavy footstep was heard. and a lonely figure quietly appeared in the number 1 booth. There is no need to investigate because all of you will die. Yixian's eyes were filled with blood, and his voice was like the tolling of a bell. He seemed to smell the scent of blood, and his entire person became more otherworldly. The sudden appearance of Yixian made Brother Hu's eyes widen. He did not expect that the other party would return. Get your weapons. Brother Hu's face was cold, and he did not waste any more words. The other party dared to return, so he was obviously not a good person. Any more words would just be unnecessary. As Brother Hu's voice fell, dozens of subordinates pulled out their steel knives and rushed towards Yixian. Looking at their posture, they were determined to hack Yixian to death on the spot. Fuck stinking brat, go die. A burly man with a green wolf tattoo slashed out with his saber. However, before he could arrive in front of Yixian, he was stunned on the spot. The machete that was raised in midair fell from his hand to the ground. Ah! Dozens of terrified screams came from these big men's mouths. The footsteps that were originally rushing towards Yixian became even more awkward, because they saw an extremely terrifying scene. The burly man with the tattoo of the green wolf seemed to have been cleaved apart from head to toe by a knife. His entire body was split into 2 halves, and a large amount of blood continuously spurted out from the 2 halves of the corpse. That terrifying scene was simply terrifying. Every Beichuan gang member present was a ruthless character in the underworld, and a few of them had killed people with their own hands. But even if they were extremely fierce, when had they ever seen such a terrifying scene? This person is a devil. A big man shouted in horror. He wanted to escape, but the exit was blocked by Yixian, and this made his eyes filled with despair. Today all of you will die. Yixian smiled cruelly. His palm was sparkling like jade, but it was slowly glowing. It was a blood-red light, and more importantly, it was the light of slaughter. Buzz! The blood-red light was biting cold, and when Yixian's palm danced, an extremely terrifying blade light cut through the void, and the miserable cries of the Beichuan gang members could be heard from the entire table. Blood rained down and severed limbs. After more than 10 seconds, the cries gradually stopped, and the entire table was dead silent, as if it had turned into an Azura slaughterhouse. The severed limbs on the ground, mixed with the thick smell of blood, filled the entire space. The smell of blood, I really miss it. Yixian stretched his arms, and an intoxicated expression appeared on his face. Suddenly opening his eyes, Yixian looked towards the corner of the table, and saw Brother Hu lying limp on the ground. A large amount of urine stained his crotch, and the steel knife in his hand had long been lost. He looked at Yixian with an indescribable fear in his eyes. You're not human, you're not human. Brother Hu was scared out of his wits, and he muttered to himself, as if he was scared silly by Yixian. Humans are like ants, and they don't know the power of heaven. You can die now, Yixian calmly said, and raised his sparkling palm, and casually slapped towards Brother Hu. No, I don't want to die. Unfortunately, before Brother Hu could plead, facing Yixian's palm, his entire body exploded into pieces, and he completely disappeared from this world. Yixian indifferently turned around and calmly left, as if he had done something very casual. Meanwhile, the young men and women dancing to the heavy metal music outside did not know that Brother Hu's table had already turned into an Azura slaughterhouse. Chapter 16. A sea of blood, 2 banks of bones, 1 person, 1 path. Yixian walked alone. There was no wind to accompany him, no living creatures. The endless sea of blood rolled behind him. Thousands of bloody souls were crying and howling. He finally stepped on the white bone throne. Looking at the gate of heaven in front of him, the loneliness in his eyes became more intense. Yixian sat quietly on the white bone throne. A shadow stood quietly beside him. I can't let go of some things. I can't let go of some people. Yixian said softly. In front of the Tongtian Great Way, there is nothing that you can't let go of. The shadow said. But I just can't let go of them. Yixian said. The shadow held his breath. When he waved his hand, a light ball emerged and merged with Yixian's sea of consciousness. Ah! Yixian let out a muffled groan. There was pain in his eyes. The boundless secular world has fallen. If you return to the human world, you will suffer the pain of 7 emotions and 6 desires. You have already felt the pain. Do you still want to go back? The shadow sighed. In fact, there is nothing in this world that you can't let go of. When you feel the pain, you will naturally let go. The shadow said in a deep voice. Yixian suddenly smiled. When his palm and fingers transformed, a light ball emerged again and merged with Yixian's sea of consciousness. But this time there was no pain on his face. Doesn't it hurt? The shadow was surprised. Yixian smiled and said, It hurts. The shadow was puzzled. Why don't you let go? Because the people I care about are waiting for me to go back. After saying that, Yixian walked down from the white bone throne and returned to the gate of the human world. Looking at Yixian's receding figure, the shadow's breath became chaotic. He suddenly roared, Yixian, if you return to the human world, you may fall into the secular world forever. Do you really want to give up the legendary Tongtian Great Way for those ignorant mortals? Unfortunately, no matter how much the shadow roared, Yixian had already disappeared from his sight. Could it be that I'm really obsessed? The mysterious man murmured to himself. The wind and snow filled the sky and the moon was bright. Yixian turned around from his thoughts. He looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain, and a trace of bitterness flashed through his eyes. This was because he chose the former between his loved ones and the great path of heaven. Yixian asked himself if he was really willing to accept this. Yixian was unwilling to accept this. He was really unwilling to accept this. No one understood the meaning of life better than Yixian. Facing the legendary Tongtian Great Tao, Yixian wanted to live as long as the heavens, immortality and indestructibility. Perhaps the shadow was right. In the secular world there were many emotions and desires. 100 years later, the people and things that Yixian cared about would be nothing more than a wisp of smoke. However, Yixian could not let it go. He really could not let it go because he was a human, a living human. He was not the heartless immortal in the legends. Dispelling his confusion, Yixian had already appeared in front of the house. Stepping into the house, Yi Ling-er was sitting at the dining table in a daze. Mother Ye's face was radiant and she was chatting with Yi Ling-er about something. Mom, let's eat, Yixian said softly. This time Yi Ling-er did not hide from Yixian. She quietly ate the food in her bowl. However, at the dining table, Yi Ling-er would occasionally steal glances at Yixian from the corner of her eyes. Her eyes were filled with deep suspicion. Mother Yi would occasionally serve food to her children with a satisfied expression. Dinner time quickly passed. When Mother Yi casually turned on the old television, a news report came out. Hello everyone, I am your host Hao Jing. I am currently at the entrance of Night Bar. The hanging mirror department has arrived at the scene of the murder. Now let us interview Constable Liu. When this voice came out from the television, Yi Ling-er's expression froze. She immediately looked at the television. Yixian frowned slightly, but his expression did not change much. He picked up the cup of tea in his hand and took a sip. Hello, Constable Liu. May I ask how many people died in Night Bar? Has the murderer been caught? The host handed the microphone to Lu Jundai. The murderer has not been caught. Rest assured, our hanging mirror department has gathered a large number of clues and will quickly arrest the murderer. As for the deceased, he is only an unemployed vagrant. Because the case is not yet solved, we cannot reveal too much information about the case, Lu Jundai said. She lied. All that blood. It's all blood. Suddenly, the camera on the television kept shaking. A waiter at Night Bar had a pale face, as if he had been scared out of his wits. He was pointing at Lu Jundai and shouting crazily. The sudden news immediately made the host excited. He immediately turned the camera to the waiter. But before the host could interview him, Lu Jundai's expression changed. She immediately ordered her subordinates to take the waiter away. Then she said to the camera, "This person is a family member of the deceased. His mental state is not stable. We will solve the case as soon as possible." The news came to an abrupt end and changed to other content. However, at this moment, Yi Ling-er's body was slightly trembling and her face was deathly pale. Until she slowly turned around to look at Yixian, her eyes filled with questions. "Mom, I will take my sister out for a walk. You should rest early," Yixian said softly. Then he walked out of the house first. Yi Ling-er frowned and quickly followed Yixian out of the house. Looking at the brother and sister walking out of the house, Mother Ye's face was filled with gratification. It was obvious that the relationship between the brother and sister had improved. On the quiet snowy road the moonlight shone down, illuminating Yixian. He walked forward slowly. Yi Ling followed silently. Until Yixian stopped, he said in a low voice, "What do you want to ask me?" Looking at Yixian's back, Yi Ling's eyes were in a trance. The person in front of her was her brother. However, he felt familiar yet unfamiliar. After a full 10 breaths, Yi Ling lowered her eyes. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's. They were killed by you? Is that important? Yixian did not turn his head. His voice was slightly low. Yi Ling suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears. Her voice trembled. Are you crazy? Those were dozens of lives. If you were caught, you would also die. Hearing Yi Ling's trembling voice, Yixian slowly turned his head. His eyes were extremely deep. He looked directly at Yi Ling and said, "Ling, do you still remember? When you were very young, every time someone bullied you, I would stand up for you. It was so in the past and it is still so now. This has never changed." Looking at Yixian's deep eyes and hearing Yixian's words, Yi Ling bit her lips. The tears in her eyes flowed out uncontrollably. In the night bar, when she was at her most desperate, only the figure of her brother, Yixian, appeared in her mind. When Yixian really appeared, Yi Ling felt as if she was dreaming. In reality, no matter how much Yi Ling appeared to hate Yixian, in her heart, she had never truly hated Yixian. However, the rebellious nature of a young girl made her unable to let go of Yixian's departure without saying goodbye. Yixian came in front of Yi Ling and wiped away the tears on her face. Yi Ling could no longer control the emotions in her heart. She opened her arms and tightly hugged Yixian. The long-awaited brother also came out of her mouth. Chapter 17. Facing the moonlight and stepping on the snow, the siblings walked home. Along the way, Yi Ling kept asking Yixian where he'd been for the past 4 years. Yixian could only find an excuse to avoid it. He couldn't tell his sister that he was actually a cultivator, that he was called the Undying Heavenly Lord by the creatures of the Blood Sea battlefield, and that his hands were stained with the blood of millions of creatures. At home the lights were bright. The siblings entered the house, but Mother Yi did not rest. She was obviously waiting for the return of her children. "Mom, I'm going to transfer Ling to another school tomorrow." Ever since he saw the school Yi Ling was in, Yixian had already thought of transferring his sister. Yi Ling had become like this. Although he had disappeared for 4 years, the terrible environment was also a large part of the reason. The environment could change people. Yixian always believed this. 4 years ago, he was just a weak youth who could not even grasp his own life. But after 4 years of life in the Blood Sea battlefield, not only did he break out of his cocoon and become a butterfly, but he also became a legendary cultivator. And this was caused by the environment. Yixian's suggestion caused Mother Yi to nod her head. It was obvious that Mother Yi was well aware of the morals of the Lanqi High School that Yi Ling was in. If it wasn't for the difficulties at home, how could she have let Yi Ling attend this high school? "Xian I'll leave this matter to you." Mother Ye's voice paused. She looked at Yixian with anticipation. "Xian you've been gone for 4 years. Now that you're back, you should put your studies on the agenda. Why don't you go to school with Ling?" Mother Ye's suggestion caused Yixian to be stunned. He'd never thought of returning to school. Just as he was about to refuse, he saw Mother Ye's expectant eyes. He could only forcefully swallow the words that were about to come out of his mouth. "Mom, I promise you." In order not to let his mother down, Yixian can only agree, but he has already thought about it. He will directly find a school to hang his name. He will never go to school. After 2 years, he will get a graduation certificate, which is also an explanation to Yi Mu. At this moment, hearing that Yixian was also going to school with her, Yi Ling smiled knowingly and said to Yixian, "Brother, you haven't been to school for 4 years. If you have any problems with your studies, you can ask me for help." Looking at Yi Ling's smiling face, Yixian helplessly shook his head and said, "Dye your hair back tomorrow. In the future you have to study hard." When Yixian reached this point, his voice came to an abrupt halt. His mind suddenly shook, and his eyes abruptly looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. An extremely complicated expression flashed across his eyes. Are you summoning me? Yixian muttered softly. Heartbreak Mountain, unknown space. The sea of blood was overturning the sky, and the spirits were crying. A blood halberd that was thousands of feet long was lying in the void. The blood-colored halberd was shining, and the 1,000-feet-long halberd was violently shaking, causing the endless sea of blood below to churn. Buzz! The halberd hummed vast and endless. It seemed to be crying, and more like it was summoning someone. It also caused this part of the world to become violent, and all the creatures in all directions did not dare to come out. A shadow came across the sky, and even when the shadow appeared next to the blood-colored halberd, it did not stop the blood-colored halberd from rampaging. Sigh! A low sigh came from the shadow's mouth. He silently looked at the blood-colored halberd, and after a full 10 breaths he said, You miss him? But he really has left. But I believe that before long, he will come back. Please believe me. The shadow said in a low voice. Rumble. Like thunder from the 9th heaven, like the stars in the sky exploding, the 1,000-feet-long blood halberd violently shook. The huge halberd was emitting a Tongtian blood light, as if it wanted to leave this space to find its master. Are you crazy? Looking at such a strange scene, the shadow roared in horror, but the fear in his eyes became more and more dignified. If you go to find him, it will definitely cause a great change. You have to believe me, he will come back. The shadow said in a trembling voice, constantly comforting the killing weapon in front of him. As the shadow explained, the blood-colored halberd gradually calmed down, until it no longer had any momentum, lying in the sky above the sea of blood. The shadow suddenly turned around, as if he wanted to look in the direction of Yixian through the blood-colored door, and the aura around him fluctuated violently. Yixian! You bastard, if you don't come back, I will not be able to control the halberd. The shadow roared in his heart. Brother, who is summoning you? What are you talking about? Yilinger asked curiously. Yixian returned from his thoughts, and his eyes were slightly complicated. He looked at Yiling, solemnly and said, Linger, if I am not here one day, you must take good care of Mother. As Yixian's voice fell, Mother Yi and Yilinger were both shocked. Yilinger even said anxiously, Brother, what's wrong? Why did you say that? Yes, Xian, is there something on your mind? Mother Yi said worriedly. Looking at the anxious faces of his mother and sister, Yixian forced a smile and said, Nothing, maybe I am just thinking too much. It was late at night. Yixian said he was sleepy and went back to the house, leaving Mother Yi and Yilinger puzzled. They did not know what had happened to Yixian. In the house, Yixian frowned slightly. He looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain and let out a soft sigh. After that, he shook his head, sat cross-legged on the bed and began to cultivate. At the same time in the Beichuan gang, Wu Jun sat in the middle with 2 iron balls rolling in his palm. His expression was somewhat gloomy until his palm suddenly tightened. When he looked again, the 2 iron balls in his palm had turned into a pile of iron powder. I haven't even looked for him and he came to me first. Wu Jun snorted coldly. Boss, according to the surveillance video, this person entered and left the night bar twice. He must be the one who killed Black Tiger, a gang member said with certainty. Boss, you asked the brothers to investigate this person's background. We have already found out. A man in black walked quickly into the Beichuan gang, and directly handed a document to Wu Jun. Wu Jun took the document. After a few minutes, a look of surprise appeared on his face. Yixian? A patient with terminal leukemia? He disappeared for 4 years, and when he reappeared he was not dead? Wu Jun murmured. That's right. According to boss's instructions, we have Xiaqiu under control. We got this information from her. Jiangnan Hospital's files also have this person's death record, the man in black said. As he listened to his subordinate's report, Wu Jun continued to knock on the table. His eyes narrowed at this moment. After a few breaths he said, Have you found out where he went in the past 4 years? What did he do? No, there was no clue at all. This person disappeared 4 years ago. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air. The black-clothed man paused for a moment before continuing. Although we didn't find out where he went in the past 4 years, we found out that he has an old mother and a younger sister at home. This person entered the night bar and killed the gang's brothers. It is very likely that it was because of his younger sister. Well, you did well. You may leave. As Wu Jun's voice fell, the man in black relaxed and hurriedly left. Obviously, Wu Jun had given him a lot of pressure. White Tiger, go and send him an invitation. Tell him that 3 days later at 6 o'clock in the evening, I would like to invite him to the Full Moon restaurant for a gathering. Wu Jun pondered for a moment before instructing a young man with a cold expression. Chapter 18. Jiangnan Hanging Mirror Department. Lu Jundai frowned. Her face looked haggard. Tai Li and Linglong didn't look too good either. They were watching the video of Yi Xian entering the night bar. I don't know who this person's master is, but he killed so many people. Although he didn't kill good people, he deserved the death penalty. Tai Li said with a pale face. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. A constable walked up to Lu Jundai and said, "Boss, we got news from inside. Wu Jun invited the suspect to the Moon Pavilion in 3 days. He is indeed the boss of the Beichuan gang. We haven't done anything yet, but he can't sit still." If Wu Jun could find out about Yi Xian, Lu Jundai's reputation as the head constable of the Hanging Mirror Department was not undeserved. Lu Jundai looked at Tai Li and Linglong. Since the case was handed over to the Wuan agency, she had to ask for their opinion. This person is an ancient warrior. We don't know his exact strength, but with the two of us, he won't be able to escape. Constable Lu, you don't have to get involved. After saying that, Tai Li left the Hanging Mirror Department with the little girl Linglong. Obviously, they were going to arrest Yi Xian in 3 days. Looking at the backs of the two leaving, Lu Jundai frowned. Obviously, they didn't recognize her and only thought of her as an ordinary person. I want to see what kind of person this Yi Xian is. Even the Wuan agency thinks so highly of him. Lu Jundai said in a low voice. The next morning, the sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly, bringing some warmth to this winter. Yi Xian faced the rising sun and slowly opened his eyes. After a night of cultivation, his mind gradually calmed down. Opening the door, he saw that it was already 9 in the morning. There was no one in the house. Yi Xian knew that his mother had gone to work early. Yiling should have gone back to school to pack her clothes and prepare for the transfer. Although Yi Xian asked his mother to quit her job, she was prevaricated by Yi Mu. She just said that she would quit her job after this month. At the dinner table, Yi Xian left 2 gold cards for his mother last night. Yi Mu did not accept them, which also made Yi Xian slightly helpless. He put away the 2 gold cards and walked out of the house directly. Jiangnan City, Sky Blue University. In the whole of Jiangnan City, the Sky Blue Academy was the best in terms of teachers. It was because it was a private aristocratic school. The teachers in the school were all role models in the education world. Their knowledge could be said to be extremely profound. Some professors who had returned from overseas would give public lectures at the Sky Blue Academy from time to time. Of course, if one wanted to become a student here, other than coming from a wealthy family, they would only recruit top students. From this, it could be seen how strict Sky Blue Academy was in selecting students. At the school gate, all kinds of luxurious cars were parked in front of the gate, just like an international car show. You could see all kinds of luxurious cars, whether you had seen them before or not, in front of the Sky Blue Academy. It was also a wonder of Jiangnan City. From time to time, students would walk out of the cars. Every one of them was wearing expensive clothes and their faces were brimming with great confidence. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yi Xian's eyes were a little dazed. His expression was a little self-deprecating. 4 years ago, he had entered the Sky Blue Academy with his excellent results. He did not expect that 4 years later, he would step foot here again. She should have returned to the capital, right? Perhaps it was because the scene reminded him of something, Yi Xian muttered to himself. Dispelling his thoughts, Yi Xian strolled into the Sky Blue Academy. Along the way, looking at the familiar buildings, old memories kept reviving in the depths of Yi Xian's mind. Vice Principal's office. When Yi Xian transferred 500,000 yuan to the Vice Principal's card, the Vice Principal's serious expression suddenly changed. He personally handled the admission procedures for Yi Xian and Yi Linger. This made Yi Xian sigh. Even if it was an institution of higher learning, As long as there was money to pave the way, the so-called strict selection of students was just a joke. After completing the admission procedures, Yixian revisited his old haunts. However, he could no longer see the people he was familiar with. This made him laugh at himself and prepare to return home. All of a sudden, before Yixian could walk out of the school gate, the roar of a motor came from behind him. It was a fiery red Maserati. It was driving towards Yixian like a steel beast. At this critical moment, an anxious female voice came from afar. Dodge quickly. At this moment, Yixian's face turned cold. His body moved slightly to the side and avoided the car behind him. This caused the Maserati to crash directly into the school's wall. Bang! With a loud bang, the front cover of the Maserati caved in and a huge crack appeared on the wall. If it wasn't for the fact that the car was priced at millions and had excellent safety measures, the car would have been destroyed and the people inside would have died. Student, are you alright? Which class are you from? Do you need me to bring you to the infirmary? Yun Mengyao was holding a book in her hand. She was wearing a teacher's uniform. Her beautiful face was filled with a scholarly aura. She was anxiously asking Yixian. Yun Mengyao's beauty was a kind of tranquil beauty. It gave people the urge to embrace her. It was as if looking at her would calm down one's troubled heart. Even Yixian's eyes lit up when he saw this girl. He couldn't help but secretly praise her. There was actually such a beauty in the world other than Xia Qingzhu. Although Yixian was stunned by Yun Mengyao's temperament and appearance, his gaze didn't linger on her for too long. He didn't answer the other party's question. Instead, he slowly walked towards the Maserati. Looking at Yixian's slightly cold attitude, Yun Mengyao was stunned. In her memory, as long as a man saw her appearance, all of them would lose themselves and become infatuated. They would even find an excuse to strike up a conversation with her. However, she only saw a hint of admiration in Yixian's eyes. There was nothing else. Ah, it hurts. The door of the Maserati opened and the airbag was removed. A young girl about 17 or 18 years old walked out of the car. Her beautiful face was pale. It was obvious that she was also in a bad state. You almost hit me. If I didn't react quickly and dodge in time, wouldn't someone else have been killed by you? Shouldn't you apologize to me? When the young girl was secretly rejoicing, Yixian's cold voice entered her ears. Looking at Yixian's gloomy face, the young girl was stunned. Only then did she remember that she almost hit Yixian. However, there was no apology on her face. She directly took out her wallet and said to Yixian, "Since you're not dead, say it. How much money do you want?" Li Yuanyuan, why aren't you apologizing to him? Unknowingly, Yun Mengyao quickly walked in front of the two and reprimanded the young girl. Ms. Yun, he just wanted to test the speed limit of this car. He didn't do it on purpose. He's not injured. Why should I apologize to him? Looking at Yun Mengyao's appearance, Li Yuanyuan seemed to have found someone to rely on. Her attitude became even more arrogant. You, tell your parents to come to the school tomorrow. Yun Mengyao was clearly angered by the young girl. Even her voice was trembling. Chapter 19. Li Yuanyuan's expression turned bitter when she heard that she needed to find her parents. She went to Yun Mengyao's side and shook her arm, saying coquettishly, "Miss Yun, please don't. You can just pay him more money. You know that my parents aren't in Jiangnan." Yun Mengyao felt like she was looking at her younger self when she saw the pleading look on the girl's face. She felt pity for her and turned to Yixian with an apologetic look, saying, "I'm really sorry. I apologize on her behalf. Can we just let this go? Miss Yun is the best. I still have things to do, so I'll leave first." Li Yuanyuan giggled and turned to leave. However, before she could take more than a few steps, Yixian's cold voice rang out. "Crafty, unreasonable, and lawless. Did I say you could leave?" Suddenly, Yun Mengyao felt her vision blur, and Yixian appeared in front of Li Yuanyuan. What happened next made Yun Mengyao feel like she was in a dream. Slap! With a crisp sound, a red handprint appeared on Li Yuanyuan's face. She was completely stunned on the spot, and after a few breaths of time, the pain on her face caused her to slowly wake up. She caressed her face in disbelief and looked at Yixian with an expression of extreme shame and anger. "You dare to hit me? You dare to hit me? That's right. My parents haven't even touched a finger of mine. How dare you hit me?" Li Yuanyuan shouted in anger. She couldn't believe that she had been slapped. The young girl's embarrassed and angry voice also caused Yun Mengyao to wake up from her shock. She quickly walked over to the young girl and looked at Yixian with an extremely unfriendly gaze. This student, although she almost bumped into you, how can you hit a girl? Unfortunately, Yixian ignored Yun Mengyao's question and walked slowly to Li Yuanyuan, saying, "That slap was your punishment for almost bumping into me?" Slap. Another loud slap was heard. Although Li Yuanyuan tried her best to dodge, for some reason, her body did not move an inch. She could only watch as Yixian's palm landed on her cheek. This slap is to teach you a lesson on behalf of your parents. From now on, get rid of your arrogant personality. Pa! Another slap rang out. Li Yuanyuan's face was already swollen, and she was completely stunned on the spot. This slap tells you that everyone has to be responsible for what they do. Even if you come from a noble family, there is no exception. After 2 consecutive slaps, Yixian glanced at the young girl indifferently, then turned around and walked out of the school gate. As for Yun Mengyao, who was already in a daze, she did not attract his attention in the slightest. Yun Mengyao only woke up when Yixian's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. She looked at Yixian's back with a complicated expression in her eyes. Yun Mengyao had lived for 21 years and had never seen such a violent man. Although Li Yuanyuan was a little unruly, she was still a young girl in the prime of her youth. The fact that her opponent could be so ruthless also refreshed Yun Mengyao's worldview. While Yun Mengyao secretly hated Yixian for being so violent, when she calmed down and thought about it carefully, Yixian did not seem to be at fault for slapping Li Yuanyuan 3 times. This strange feeling made her firmly remember Yixian's figure in her mind. Walking on the bustling street, Yixian's expression was calm. He did not feel the slightest bit of guilt for giving the young girl 3 slaps. Yixian did not feel the slightest bit guilty. Not to mention that the other party was a young girl. Even if it was a beauty like Yun Mengyao, Yixian would definitely not be lenient. This was just an interlude, so Yixian did not take it to heart. Holding Sky Blue Academy's acceptance letter, Yixian strolled back home. In front of the Yi family's house, a luxurious car stopped in front of the door, with several large men in black standing on both sides. When Yixian saw this scene, his eyes gradually narrowed, and then he slowly walked back home. Brother! Yixian had just stepped into the house when he saw Yiling Er's little face pale. She hurriedly walked towards Yixian, and behind her was a young man with a cold expression, silently watching Yixian. Ling go back to the house first, Yixian calmly said. Brother, he is the Beichuan gang, Yiling anxiously said, but before she could finish, Yixian interrupted her and said, Go. As Yixian's voice fell, Yiling eyes were filled with worry, but she still listened to Yixian and returned to her room. You are Mr. Yi, right? The young man strolled towards Yixian, directly took out a golden invitation and handed it to Yixian, saying, Our gang leader has long heard of Mr. Ye's great name, and invites you to meet at Full Moon Restaurant in 3 days. After receiving the golden invitation, Yixian did not look at it, and casually threw it on the table. This made the young man mistakenly think that Yixian did not dare to meet, and a cold smile appeared on his face, saying, I hope Mr. Yi will grace us with your presence, or else Dr. Xia Qiu. Haha. After the young man finished speaking, he did not stay, and directly turned to leave Yixian's house. Until the person disappeared from Yixian's sight, Yixian did not respond from beginning to end. Dong dong dong. Yixian's fingers tapped on the table, and his expression was abnormally calm. However, when his eyes opened and closed, a trace of blood flashed past. Even after Yixian sat upright for a long time, the golden invitation on the table did not move. For the Beichuan gang to be able to find him, it was obvious that they had investigated his background, and even imprisoned Xia Qiu to threaten him. Clearly, the other party should also know that he was responsible for the death of the Li siblings. However, the so-called Beichuan gang was not in Yixian's eyes. What he had some misgivings about was the colossus that was Xia country. Yixian was not a reckless man, and he had an absolutely tyrannical cultivation. Before the age of 5, he had lived in the capital Yi family, and he knew many secrets that ordinary people did not know. In this world there were ancient warriors and even some ability users. As for the colossus that was Xia country, There were several mysterious departments that restricted these ancient warriors and ability users. Yi Xian knew very well that since the Beichuan gang could find him, the mysterious departments of Xia country were not to be trifled with. They had probably noticed his existence long ago. If Yi Xian was alone, he would not have taken them seriously. However, he still had his mother and sister at home. If he really went against these mysterious departments, he was afraid that his family would be implicated. After all, the other party represented Xia country. If they were to go against each other, this was not something that Yi Xian wanted to see. At the thought of this, Yi Xian shook his head helplessly. Perhaps this was the suffering of the boundless secular world that the virtual shadow had mentioned, and also the reason why he had tried so hard to prevent him from returning to the human world. Dispelling the thoughts in his mind, Yi Xian smiled in a carefree manner. There was no trace of worry in his eyes. Although he did not want to go against these mysterious departments, it did not mean that he, Yi Xian, was afraid of them. As an existence that surpassed mortals, if they knew what was good for them, they would naturally live in peace. However, if they insisted on going against him, then perhaps Yi Xian would become the immortal heavenly lord and let some people know what true terror was. Transcending mortals, emotionless six desires, wielding the power of life and death, and being known as the immortal heavenly lord. If it were not for the fact that he could not let go of the people and matters in the human world, Yi Xian would have stepped into the earth immortal realm long ago to search for what he truly wanted in the depths of his heart. Brother, you can't go. Unknowingly, Yi Linger had walked out of the room. Clearly, she had heard the words of the young man just now. This also caused her to try her best to persuade Yi Xian. You don't have to ask about my matters. Also, don't tell mother about this lest she worries. This is the admission notice of Sky Blue Academy. You will report to the school tomorrow. Yi Xian casually handed the admission notice to Yi Linger, and turned to return to the house. Chapter 20. The Full Moon Restaurant was located in the center of Jiangnan City. It was one of the best restaurants in Jiangnan City. It was also a money-squandering establishment in the eyes of the poor. It had complete entertainment facilities that catered to high-ranking officials and dignitaries. There was nothing the Full Moon Restaurant couldn't do. As long as you had the money, it could satisfy all your needs. The Full Moon Restaurant was famous not only because of the service, but also because no one dared to cause trouble there. The owner of the restaurant was Wu Jun, the Beichuan gang's leader, was an ancient martial arts expert whose cultivation had reached the covert power stage. He was definitely one of the top 10 in the entire Jiangnan City. Full Moon Restaurant, Heavenly Cloud Hall. A sumptuous banquet filled the entire round table. The mellow aroma of wine wafted through the hall. Wu Jun sat at the head of the table, with a dozen subordinates on both sides. They were quietly waiting for Yi Xian's arrival. Wu Jun's eyes narrowed slightly. His face was expressionless, but the sound of his fingers tapping on the table continued to reverberate in the hall. Boss, he's here. One of his subordinates walked into the hall quickly. Let him in. Wu Jun's eyes narrowed as he ordered his subordinates. Soon the door to the hall was pushed open. Yi Xian strolled into the hall with a calm expression. Haha. Wu Jun laughed when he saw Yi Xian. He stood up and greeted him. I've heard so much about you, Mr. Yi Xian. You're indeed a dragon among men. Please take a seat. There was neither a clash of weapons nor a solemn atmosphere as expected. Wu Jun seemed to have met an old friend whom he hadn't seen for many years. His expression was warm. As the leader of the Beichuan gang, Wu Jun wasn't a street thug. He didn't want to fall out with Yi Xian on the spot before he understood his strength. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't respond to Wu Jun's enthusiasm. He simply found a seat and sat down. Wu Jun's expression changed slightly, turning slightly gloomy. Mr. Yi, not only did you kill the Li siblings, but you also killed a dozen of my gang members. I have to say that you're very brave to come here alone. Wu Jun's voice was low as he sat across from Yi Xian. Yi Xian lifted the wine jug and filled his cup to the brim. Then he downed the wine in one gulp. Only then did he look at Wu Jun and said in a calm voice, If I were you, I wouldn't say so much nonsense. As Yi Xian's voice fell, Wu Jun's expression turned ugly. More than a dozen of his men standing beside him pulled out their guns and pointed them at Yi Xian. I have to say, although you are very courageous, you are throwing your life away here. Wu Jun stood up from his seat, his arms propped up on the table. He looked at Yi Xian as if he were looking at a dead man. Creak. The door to Heavenly Cloud Hall was pushed open and a gang member walked in with Xiaqiu. The gun in his hand was pointed at Xiaqiu's forehead. Looking at the scene before him, Yi Xian frowned slightly, but his expression didn't change much. Little Yi, you shouldn't have come. Looking at the scene before her, how could Xiaqiu not know what was going on? As an ancient warrior, I know that you're not afraid of these ordinary guns. However, if you want your friend to live, you'd better surrender. Otherwise, Wu Jun laughed sinisterly as if victory was already in his hands. The wind was blowing and the clouds were calm, untainted by smoke. Yi Xian stood up slowly with a playful look in his eyes. He said, "This is really melodramatic. Do you really think that you can threaten me with her life?" Xiaqiu was his benefactor. Yi Xian was definitely here to save Xiaqiu. However, in Yi Xian's heart, no one in this world could threaten him. Even Xiaqiu was no exception. Yi Xian only found it funny that Wu Jun made such a dog-blooded threat. Wu Jun said in surprise. He felt that something was out of his control. Kill her. Wu Jun was a decisive and ruthless person. He didn't believe that Yi Xian didn't care about Xiaqiu's life at all. Unfortunately, before Wu Jun's subordinates could shoot, he was sent flying. The door of the Heavenly Cloud Hall shattered, and two figures appeared beside Xiaqiu. They finally appeared. Looking at Tai Li and the little girl Ling Long, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. These were the people he had been waiting for. In fact, Yi Xian could have saved Xiaqiu directly. However, he had already sensed Tai Li and Ling Long's presence, so he didn't do anything. Wu Jun, although you're an ancient warrior, killing ordinary people for no reason, are you looking down on the Wuan agency? Tai Li's expression was cold as he questioned Wu Jun, people from the Wuan agency? Looking at Tai Li and Ling Long's appearance, Wu Jun's face turned pale. Although he was the leader of the Beichuan gang, he had to retreat when facing people from the Wuan agency. He knew that he wouldn't be able to kill Yi Xian today. Sirs, you must be joking. Today, I'm only treating this little brother to dinner. Now that dinner is over, I'll take my leave first. Wu Jun forced a smile. Then, he looked deeply at Yi Xian and gestured for his subordinates to leave. Unfortunately, before Wu Jun could take a few steps, Yi Xian's calm voice sounded behind him. Did I give you permission to leave? Wu Jun's expression changed drastically as he turned around. He had never thought that he would let Yi Xian go because of the people from the Wuan agency. However, Yi Xian didn't know when to back down. Kid, I'll give the Wuan agency some face today and won't lower myself to your level. I hope you can escape today. Wu Jun sneered as he led his subordinates out of the Heavenly Cloud Hall. The appearance of the Wuan agency was obviously targeting Yi Xian. In Wu Jun's eyes, Yi Xian was already a bird in a cage. Even if he didn't die, he would probably spend the rest of his life in the Wuan agency's prison. The only pity was that he couldn't get Yi Xian's head to exchange for the 300 million Chinese currency from the Li family. Seeing Wu Jun gradually disappear from his sight, Yi Xian didn't move. He didn't pursue this person either. Instead, he muttered to Yi Xian, I've said it before. You can't leave. Yi Xian, as an ancient martial art practitioner, you are suspected of murdering dozens of people. Come with us. Tai Li strode towards Yi Xian. A glowing rope appeared in his hand. It was obvious that it had great restraining power against ancient martial art practitioners. Wang! Suddenly Yi Xian moved, like a gentle breeze brushing past a willow tree or a wave sweeping past. Before Tai Li could react, a jade-like palm suddenly grabbed Tai Li's neck and lifted him into the air as if he was a chick. Iron body technique. Tai Li never expected that Yi Xian would dare to attack him. After a moment of shock, he immediately activated his special ability. His entire body instantly emitted a misty light. His body turned silvery white, as if he was covered in a layer of fine steel. Bang! Metal collided and sparks appeared. Tai Li mustered all his strength and broke free from Yi Xian's grasp. The little girl, Ling Long, quickly appeared behind Tai Li. Her black eyes suddenly turned dark blue and her aura became colder. Seeing the two of them acting as if they were facing a great enemy, Yi Xian had a strange look in his eyes. He said, interesting. Chapter 21. Don't move. All of a sudden, just as Yixian and the Wuxia were confronting each other, a delicate voice came from outside the door. Lu Jundai held a gun in her hand as she quickly walked into the heavenly cloud hall. She looked at Yixian with a passionate gaze. Yixian, I am Lu Jundai from the Jiangnan Hanging Mirror Department. I am arresting you for murder. If you dare to resist, don't blame me for killing you on the spot. Ha! Hearing Lu Jundai's righteous warning, the corners of Yixian's mouth curled into a disdainful smile as he said, according to what I know, the Hanging Mirror Department is a place that punishes evil and promotes good. That Wu Jun is from the underworld and has committed countless evil deeds. You guys aren't going to capture him first, but you insist on targeting me. As Yixian spoke to hear, his expression slowly turned gloomy as he continued, or, do you think that I, Yixian, am easy to bully? As soon as Yixian finished speaking, Lu Jundai's face instantly flushed red. Tai Li and Ling Long were also somewhat embarrassed. It was obvious that Yixian's questioning had caused them to feel ashamed. Just as Yixian said, Wu Jun was in charge of the Beichuan gang and had been running rampant in Jiangnan City for many years. He had someone behind him, and this person was someone that Tai Li and Ling Long could not afford to offend, let alone Lu Jundai. Wu Jun is not a good person. I, Lu Jundai, promise you that I will not let him go. But it is a fact that you have killed dozens of people. If you surrender now, we will be lenient with you. Lu Jundai said confidently. Little Yi, go with Constable Lu. She is a good person. She will not harm you. Xiaqiu did not know Tai Li and Ling Long, but Lu Jundai was a constable of the Hanging Mirror Department. So she tried to persuade Yixian. Unfortunately, Yixian remained indifferent. He only indifferently looked at Lu Jundai and the other two and said, I'll give the three of you a chance. Pretend that I didn't see you today. If you know your limits, it's not too late to leave now. Boom! When Yixian finished speaking, the temperature of the entire heavenly cloud hall plummeted. An extremely terrifying pressure assaulted the three of them. Constable Lu, you won't be of any help here. Hurry up and leave. Tai Li's expression was grave as he hurriedly spoke to Lu Jundai. Yixian, surrender. Lu Jundai ignored Tai Li's warning and walked toward Yixian with a gun in her hand. Clearly, she wanted to bring Yixian back to the Hanging Mirror Department for interrogation. You really are ignorant. Yixian took a step forward. It was as if he had torn apart time and space. Leaving behind a series of afterimages, he appeared in front of Lu Jundai in an instant. Bang! Flames sprayed out and bullets tore through the air. Facing Yixian's attack, Lu Jundai didn't hesitate any longer and directly pulled the trigger in her hand. Wang! Time seemed to have stopped and space seemed to have frozen. A yellowish bullet was stopped in front of Yixian. He looked at the stunned Lu Jundai with disdain in his eyes. How is this possible? Such a scene shocked Tai Li to the core. Even the little girl, Ling Long, widened her eyes as she stared at the unbelievable scene in front of her. Yixian's hand was as clear as jade, giving off an intoxicating feeling. It was this same hand that was slowly lifting up and grabbing the gun in Lu Jundai's hand. Crack! The steel gun was turned into a pile of metal powder in the next moment. As Yixian scattered the powder, his face was expressionless. Ling Long, do it! Tai Li roared loudly. His body, which seemed to be forged from steel, brazenly pounced towards Yixian. The little girl's exquisite eyes were deep blue. It was unknown what she was chanting, but an extremely strange fluctuation also attacked Yixian. Bang! Lu Jundai also woke up from her shock and directly smashed her pink fists onto Yixian's chest. You guys are really courting death. Facing the combined attacks of the three of them, Yixian's eyes narrowed. He didn't seem to make any movements, but he struck out with his palm, sending Lu Jundai flying a few meters away. Lu Jundai's face was pale as blood spurted out of her mouth. Her curvaceous body fell to the ground. Her uniform was stained with blood, making her look extremely pitiful. Bang! Yixian didn't even bother to look at Lu Jundai. His jade-like palm directly pressed down on Tai Li. Following a loud explosion, Tai Li's silver-white body directly cracked like a spider web. His entire body was sent flying like a kite with its string cut. He directly smashed into the ground, creating a human-shaped crater. His sternum caved in and blood spurted out of his mouth. Ty Lee was covered in blood. He struggled to get up, but under such heavy injuries even moving a finger was difficult. Boom! Yixian took a step forward and the air exploded. Yixian suddenly appeared in front of the little girl, Ling Long. Under the other party's terrified gaze, Yixian grabbed the little girl's neck and lifted her into the air. Consciousness attack? No, there's no spiritual energy in your body. Is this the so-called mental ability? Yixian muttered to himself. His hand was slowly closing, causing Ling Long's face to turn purple. Blood flowed out of her mouth, as if she would be killed by Yixian in the next moment. No, you can't kill her. Please. Looking at Ling Long in the hands of Yixian, Ty Lee's face was pale. His bloodied body crawled towards Yixian as he pleaded with Yixian in a trembling voice. Yixian, if you want to kill someone, kill me. Lu Jundai struggled to get up, but she looked pitiful. They had not expected the person they were trying to capture to be this terrifying. Little Yixian, let go. Let go. Xia Qiu came before Yixian anxiously, grabbing onto his clothes and begging. Bam! Yixian's expression was calm as he casually tossed Ling Long to the ground. He didn't really attack her. You guys should be thankful that you managed to survive today. I hope you guys can take care of yourselves in the future. Yixian's indifferent voice caused Lu Jundai and the other two to have complicated expressions. When the three of them saw Yixian walk out the door, Lu Jundai's expression abruptly changed. She ignored her own safety and shouted at Yixian, where are you going? I've said it before. Wu Jun won't be able to leave. If I, Yixian, want to kill someone, no one in this world can survive. Yixian's figure had already disappeared, but his emotionless voice echoed in the ears of Lu Jundai and the others. After Yixian left, the entire Heaven Cloud Hall was dead silent. Everyone's face was filled with shock. They knew that tonight was going to be a sleepless night. Grandmaster. He must be an ancient grandmaster. I didn't expect an ancient grandmaster to appear in the small Jiangnan city. Ty Lee murmured, his eyes filled with shock. Ancient martial arts were divided into obvious strength, inward strength, and neutral strength. When one stepped into neutral strength, one would definitely be a master. Above neutral strength was the legendary grandmaster. They were existences that could establish their own sections. This kind of existence was beyond the ordinary. No matter where they went, they would be a high and mighty existence. Their methods were mysterious and unpredictable. Only those ancient martial arts families might have grandmasters. In Ty Lee's eyes, Yixian must be an ancient martial grandmaster. Otherwise, how could he and Ling Long be unable to even last a single round and lose to Yixian? Chapter 22. A crescent moon hung high in the sky. The silver moonlight shone down on Yixian, making him look like an immortal under the moonlight. Under the moonlight, Yixian walked slowly on the snowy ground. His expression was calm and his eyes were calm. He was unmoved by the fact that Lu Jundai and the rest had been severely injured. Yixian had always been merciless and ruthless. However, facing Lu Jundai and the rest today, Yixian had held back. It was not that he could not bear it, but there were some things that were better left unsaid. Although he was an immortal cultivator and was known as the Undying Heavenly Lord, he was still a citizen of the Great Xia. It was this land that gave birth to him, so he did not want to be on the opposite side of the Great Xia. Today, Yixian had displayed some of his strength. He was telling the people in charge of the Wuan agency that he, Yixian, was not an ordinary person. They could not use any restrictions to restrain him. If the other party could understand Yixian's intentions, then nothing would happen. However, if the other party did not know when to back down and insisted on targeting him, then Yixian would have no choice but to show them what true terror was. Lilac Building, Beichuan Group. Wu Jun sat on the sofa with an ugly expression on his face. More than 10 subordinates stood beside him. None of them dared to breathe too loudly, afraid of offending Wu Jun boss. Li Zongshan just called to ask about the progress of the matter. One of his subordinates said cautiously to Wu Jun, "Tell him that the Wuan agency is already involved in this matter. If he wants Yixian's life, let him do it himself." Wu Jun's face was dark and his voice was cold. Then should we return the 100 million that we accepted from Li Zongshan? Bam! Wu Jun raised his hand and slapped him, sending him flying. The suppressed anger in his heart finally exploded. When has Lao Tzu ever returned the money he accepted? Motherfucker, now that the Martial Security Bureau is involved in this matter, they will definitely keep an eye on me. It's just 100 million xia dollars. Just take it as compensation for my loss. Wu Jun kept pacing back and forth. His face was extremely gloomy. It was obvious that the appearance of the Martial Security Bureau made him extremely uneasy. No, I have to call Big Brother. Only then can I be absolutely sure. Wu Jun muttered to himself. Then, he summoned his subordinate and said, "Go and get my phone." As Wu Jun's voice fell, something strange happened. The dozen or so subordinates beside Wu Jun did not move at all. It was as though they had turned into wooden puppets. This made Wu Jun furious. He said, "Are you all fucking stupid? I told you to give me the phone, All of a sudden Wu Jun's expression changed, and he could no longer continue speaking. His pupils shrunk, and a large amount of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. What did he see? The eyes of the dozen or so subordinates lost their luster. Traces of blood spurted out from their necks. As these subordinates fell to the ground, the entire conference room was filled with an extremely thick smell of blood. Buzz! The void buzzed and ripples spread out. A figure walked out of the void and looked at Wu Jun with a playful expression. Thump thump thump. Wu Jun felt a chill run down his spine, as though he had fallen into an abyss. When Wu Jun saw the face of the person in front of him, his eyes were wide open. There was extreme fear in his eyes. He took a few steps back and stumbled to the ground. It's you. How could it be you? Wu Jun's lips were pale, and his face was as pale as a sheet. He was completely stunned on the spot, and even the dignity of an ancient martial artist did not exist. Wu Jun could not be blamed for his reaction. It was because the way Yixian appeared was too shocking. In Wu Jun's knowledge, even an ancient martial arts master could not appear out of thin air. However, Yixian's body was floating in the air, and his body was emitting rays of blood-red light. This was not an ancient martial artist, but an unknown existence. You're not an ancient martial artist. No. This is a supernatural ability? No. This is not a supernatural ability. Could it be that you are? Wu Jun trembled as he spoke. It was as though he had lost his mind, and an ancient legend appeared in his mind. An ancient legend. In the distant past, people could move mountains and fill seas. They could also fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. Such existences were collectively called immortal cultivators by mortals. They were above mortals and could roam freely between heaven and earth. They could easily destroy the world. After all, legends were just legends. No one could prove whether they were true or not. However, such legends had been circulating in the world. At this moment, Wu Jun was very sure that Yixian who appeared in front of him was perhaps one of those legendary figures. I've said before that you can't leave. You can go in peace. Yixian did not care about Wu Jun's thoughts at all. He walked slowly in the void, and when he raised his palm and fingers, a misty blood-red light bloomed around him. It was as though he was going to kill Wu Jun in the next moment. Even an ant craved for life, let alone Wu Jun. When the terror of death struck him, Wu Jun instantly regained his senses. His face was pale as he knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yixian. He said, Exalted Immortal, don't kill me. I have money, a lot of money. Please spare my life. Oh! The blood-red light around Yixian faded, and his killing intent dissipated. There was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. This made Wu Jun happy, as though he had seen the hope of survival. Wu Jun quickly opened the safe and a black gold card appeared in his hand. His eyes were filled with great heartache. However, when he had to choose between his life and money, he still chose his own life. Exalted Immortal. This supreme black card has 500 million great xia dollars. The password is 654123. Please accept it, Exalted Immortal. As Wu Jun spoke, he directly handed the card to Yixian. When he saw Yixian accept the supreme black card, Wu Jun's heart was finally at ease. He felt that his life was guaranteed. Exalted Immortal Chi. Without waiting for Wu Jun to continue speaking, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. A chill appeared on his throat. Wu Jun was stunned. He slowly raised his hand to press on his throat, but blood spurted out uncontrollably from his neck. Why? In his final moments, Wu Jun stared at Yixian with a death stare. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. I have never promised you that I would let you live. But on account of this money, I will leave you with a complete corpse. You can die in peace. A flash of sword light dissipated from Yixian's sword finger. His voice was cold and emotionless. Without even looking at Wu Jun, he disappeared from the meeting room. Bam! Following Yixian's departure, Wu Jun clutched at his throat. With a heart filled with unwillingness, he turned into a cold corpse and collapsed to the ground. But his eyes were wide open before he died, proving that he died with a grievance. If you don't remove the roots of the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. This was a principle that Yixian understood very well. From the moment Wu Jun kidnapped Xiaqiu, he was already destined to die. Yixian was a person who was afraid of trouble, and all trouble came from people. Nipping trouble in the bud and killing it completely was the principle that Yixian believed in, because only the dead could not add to his troubles. Chapter 23. Li Family Villa. A sea of fire burned fiercely, completely engulfing the entire villa. There were a large number of fire trucks in front of the villa, but the fire spread very quickly. It did not take long for the Li family villa to be burned to the ground. Standing in the bustling crowd, Yixian calmly watched the scene in front of him. Even when he turned around and left, he did not attract anyone's attention. Yixian had killed Wu Jun, so how could he let Li Zongshan go? That night, Jiangnan City was not peaceful. The Beichuan gang's leader died tragically in the gang, and the Li family was burned to ashes overnight. This kind of news spread quickly. How could their old rivals let go of this rare opportunity? The Beichuan gang's territory was quickly eaten up by the other two underground forces, and all of the Li family's business was divided up by the other families. The changes that happened overnight also broke the structure of the entire Jiangnan City. Jiangnan Hospital. Tai Li was lying on the bed, his entire body wrapped in bandages. He was talking to someone on his phone. He must be an ancient martial arts master. There's no mistake about it, Tai Li said with extreme certainty. Yes, it's the leader. Okay, I got it. After a full 10 minutes, Tai Li hung up the phone. Brother Tai, what did the leader say? Ling Long sat by the bed and asked. The leader told us not to act rashly. He's bringing the underground team members to Jiangnan City, Tai Li said with a complicated look in his eyes. Hearing Tai Li's words, Ling Long's eyes lit up. That's great. As long as the leader and the others arrive in Jiangnan City, that guy won't be able to escape. Sigh. I'm afraid the leader isn't here to capture him. Tai Li sighed. Looking at Tai Li's complicated expression, Ling Long's little face was stunned. A look of surprise appeared in her eyes, as if she had thought of something. Could it be that the leader wants to take him in? Ling Long asked in shock. That's an ancient martial arts master. If I were the leader, I'm afraid I would have the same idea. Tai Li smiled bitterly. It can't be? After getting confirmation from Tai Li, Ling Long's little face immediately turned bitter. She said, if we take him in, won't we become teammates with him? Teammates? Tai Li laughed self-deprecatingly. Ling Long, you're thinking too much. Not to mention other things, he's an ancient martial arts master. At the very least, he's a leader. You and I might have to listen to his orders. After Tai Li finished speaking, Yixian's figure couldn't help but appear in his mind. When he thought of Yixian's terrifying methods, an extreme chill rose from the bottom of his heart. And the Jiangnan City, of the Jiangnan City, and of the Jiangnan City. The higher-ups of the Martial Security Bureau had given the order that the Martial Security Bureau was fully in charge of these two matters. This also meant that the Jiangnan Prefectural Magistrate and the Hanging Mirror Bureau did not need to continue investigating. These days, Yixian. He planted flowers, raised grass, and read ancient books. When his little sister's mother came home, the family would have a happy dinner. He cherished this kind of peaceful life. The family was on the right track. Everything was developing in a good direction. This was what Yixian wanted to see. However, ever since Yiling, Found out that Yixian had not only returned safely from his appointment with Wu Jun, but also that the Beichuan gang had stopped looking for trouble with Yixian, Yiling realized that her brother was not an ordinary person. Every day after school, she would pester Yixian. She wanted to find out what secrets Yixian had. Brother, hurry up and tell me, do you know martial arts? The kind that allows you to leap over roofs and vault over walls, and use your inner strength to hurt people? Early in the morning, Yixian was leisurely drinking tea as he held an ancient book in his hand. Yiling walked out of her room and wrapped her arms around Yixian's neck as she spoke coquettishly to him. Looking at Yiling curious little face, Yixian shook his head helplessly. A few days had passed. Every day when she went to school, she would ask Yixian about it. This made Yixian feel helpless. Okay, you're late for school. If you don't leave now, you'll be late. Yixian rubbed his little sister's hair. Tisk, forget it if you don't want to tell me. Yiling pouted. She picked up her bag and walked out of the house. But after a few steps, she suddenly turned around and said to Yixian, brother, you don't have a girlfriend yet, right? Let me tell you, our language teacher is a great beauty. She's definitely not any worse than Xia Qingzhu. Why don't you go to school with me? When the time comes, hearing Yiling words, Yixian suddenly froze. A figure appeared in his mind. But in the blink of an eye, it disappeared from his mind. However, Yixian's eyes were complicated. Clearly, there were some fluctuations in his heart. Yiling seemed to know that she had said something wrong. Her heart tightened. She quickly said, brother, I didn't do it on purpose. I won't mention her again. Okay, go to school. Yixian waved his hand and continued to read the ancient book in his hand. Yiling looked at her brother's calm face and sighed in her heart. She could only quickly walk out of the house and rush to school. As his little sister left home, Yixian put down the ancient book. He put his hands behind his back and looked in the direction of the capital. His eyes were deep. Memories from long ago flashed through his mind one by one. Yixian, I'm waiting for you to marry me. Bright and beautiful, cold and intimidating. When she smiled, it was as if an iceberg was about to melt. It was as if the common people were about to be intoxicated by her smile. Yixian, you're just an abandoned son of the Yi family. How can you be worthy of my daughter? From now on, you're not allowed to contact her. If I find out, don't blame me for being rude to you. These were her father's words. She's a proud daughter of heaven. What are you? The eldest son of the Yi family sneered. Jiangnan Hospital. Yixian was terminally ill and was lying on the bed. Xia Qingzhu's eyes were downcast. The room was silent. After a long time, Xia Qingzhu looked up at Yixian and said, have you ever liked me? The young man and woman looked at each other speechless. Yixian was seriously ill and on the verge of death. There was no hope for his future. He deeply understood that when Xia Qingzhu said these words, it was just a reason for her to be free. After a long time, Yixian's eyes flashed with sadness. He gave her the answer she wanted. Maybe. I used to like you. I have to go back to the capital. After today, we won't meet again. I hope you can meet the right person in the future. Yixian's voice was calm as he slowly closed his eyes. His thoughts returned. Yixian woke up from his memories. He looked in the direction of the capital. His voice was slightly hoarse. With a thought there is love in all rivers and mountains. With a thought there is no heart in the world. Rising from the sea of blood and reviving from the ashes, those 4 years of wandering between life and death allowed Yixian to truly mature. Perhaps the love of the past would remain in his heart forever, but it wouldn't cause the slightest ripple. Meeting was fate. Not meeting was also fate. As for Xia Qingzhu, ever since Yixian returned to the world, he no longer had any illusions. He was heartless, but wasn't Xia Qingzhu the same in the past? Chapter 24. Yixian laughed self-deprecatingly. What was wrong with him? It was just the feelings of his youth that made him feel emotional. Retracting his troubled thoughts, Yixian walked out of the house and headed in the direction of the city center of Jiangnan. Buying a house. That's right. Yixian was preparing to buy a house. When he obtained this ill-gotten wealth from Wu Jun, Yixian had already decided to change the environment of his home. A total of 500 million Xia dollars was more than enough to buy an entire villa in Jiangnan City. If someone were to ask where in Jiangnan City were the most upper-class people, the answer would be Baiyun Pavilion. High officials and dignitaries, business and political celebrities, all took pride in staying in Baiyun Pavilion. There were even many rich people who became rich overnight. If they wanted to enter the upper circle, they had to buy a villa in Baiyun Pavilion to show off their status. Of course, the real high officials and dignitaries would not personally go to Baiyun Pavilion to buy a house. When the property was put up for sale, Baiyun Pavilion had already reserved the house for them. And those who would actually step into Baiyun Pavilion to buy a house were mostly people who had a sudden increase in wealth. For example, they had occupied land, demolished houses, and received huge amounts of compensation from the state. And the villas bought by these people were not only expensive, but also in extremely remote locations. However, in order to enter the so-called upper circle, they were willing to spend a lot of money to buy a villa in Baiyun Pavilion. At this time it was winter. There were not many people coming to Baiyun Pavilion's sales office. A few sales ladies had nothing to do. Some were touching up their makeup, while others were chatting with their boyfriends on the phone. This made the entire sales office seem a little deserted. Yixian strolled in the sales hall. From time to time, he would look at the locations of the villas on the sand table. Beside him was a young and beautiful sales lady who constantly introduced the details of each villa. There were no melodramatic scenes where the sales lady looked down on people, nor were there any brainless villains mocking Yixian. These sales ladies had their own professional qualities, so naturally, they would not do such a stupid thing. However, Xiechuchu, who followed Yixian, did not have much hope that Yixian would be able to buy a villa. This was because in Xiechuchu's eyes, Yixian was at most 20 years old, and he was dressed very plainly. He was not the kind of tycoon who got rich overnight. As a sales lady, Xiechuchu had to receive all kinds of customers every day. She had received many young people like Yixian, but other than flirting with her, she had never gotten a single sale. Although Xiechuchu didn't have much hope for Yixian, no matter what Yixian asked, she would answer with a smile. No one could find fault with her etiquette. Mr. Yi, although this villa is located in a remote area, it has all the necessary facilities. The interior decoration was designed by a master. This is also the best house we have, Xiechuchu explained patiently to Yixian. Yixian slowly shook his head and said, "No, this location is too far back. It would take about 10 minutes to walk out. I won't consider it." When Yixian finished speaking, a villa's sand table came into view, causing him to quickly look at the sand table. This location is not bad. Not only is it in the center of the villa, but there is also a botanical garden next to it. The air quality should be good. Mother and sister living here will be very beneficial to their health. How much is this villa? Yixian took a liking to the villa at first glance and directly asked for the price. Looking at Yixian's serious expression, Xiechuchu was slightly stunned. She then said, "This villa including taxes is 35 million. Yes, this is it. Let's sign the contract now." Yixian nodded. He was very satisfied with the villa. Sir, what did you say? Xiechuchu asked with a trembling voice. She could not believe her ears. Looking at Xiechuchu's stunned expression, Yixian frowned slightly. He could only repeat his previous words. When Yixian finished speaking, he had already taken out the supreme black card in his hand, causing Xiechuchu to completely wake up. Looking at the supreme black card in Yixian's hand, as a sales lady, how could Xiechuchu not know the value of this black card? She had once seen this card in the hands of a rich man. It was said that in order to have this kind of supreme black card, the card had to have at least 100 million Wuxia currency. Only now did Xiechuchu truly believe that this man, who was about the same age as her, really wanted to buy a house in the Baiyun Pavilion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Yi. This villa is not for sale. Can you change it?" At this moment, Xiechuchu was biting her lips tightly. Her emotions were extremely complicated because the villa that Yixian had his eyes on was not for sale. It was a residence that the company had left for another upper-class person. As a sales lady, she knew that such a big deal might not come across even once a year. If they could really close the deal, just the commission alone would be as high as 1 million. This would also completely solve her family's predicament. However, the company did not sell the villa that Yixian had his eyes on. This made Xiechuchu extremely depressed. She was very afraid that Yi Xian would leave because of dissatisfaction. Not for sale. Looking at Xiechuchu's pale face, Yi Xian frowned slightly. He had almost finished looking at all the villa sand tables. This was the only villa that he liked. The others were simply not within his scope of consideration. My mother's health is not very good, so the surrounding air must be fresh and clean. Since this villa is not for sale, I'll go look elsewhere. Although the woman in front of him was looking at him with pleading eyes, how could Yi Xian choose a bad environment for a strange woman? After saying this, Yi Xian also prepared to leave. However, before he could take 2 steps, Xiechuchu's face turned pale. She hurriedly stopped in front of him and begged, "Mr. Yi, please wait. I'll ask the manager to see if I can sell this house to you." All right. Yi Xian pondered for a few seconds and agreed. Thank you, thank you. After receiving Yi Xian's reply, Xiechuchu's face was filled with gratitude. She bowed to Yi Xian and hurriedly walked towards the manager's office. Yi Xian sat on the sofa in the sales hall and waited patiently. However, after a full 20 minutes, he still did not see Xiechuchu's figure. This also made Yi Xian gradually frown. His divine sense floated out and a scene appeared in Yi Xian's eyes. In the manager's office, a middle-aged man with a cold expression was scolding Xiechuchu, who was in front of him. "What are you doing? Didn't I tell you that the house is not for sale?" "Manager, that Mr. Qi did not pay a deposit. Moreover, this Mr. Yi is buying a house for his mother. This house happens to be near the botanical garden. It's very beneficial for his mother. He can sign the contract now. Can't you make an exception?" Xiechuchu begged with tears in her eyes. "What Mr. Yi? Mr. Shu Yi? He's just a country bumpkin. How can he compare to young Master Qi? I've already promised young Master Qi that even if young Master Qi doesn't buy it in the end, this house will not be for sale." The middle-aged man's words were fierce as he kept scolding Xiechuchu. Chapter 25. The middle-aged man paused and said slowly, "Little Xie, I know that your mother is seriously ill and you need money urgently. But the company has its rules and regulations and you can't change them at will. How about this? I'll go and send him away." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he directly opened the door and walked towards Yi Xian. Xiechuchu wiped her tears and could only silently follow behind him. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm. However, he'd seen everything that had happened in the office. "Hello, Mr. Yi. I'm really sorry. The house you chose has been sold. Our staff didn't understand the situation and wasted your precious time. I'm very sorry." The middle-aged man came in front of Yi Xian and said with a professional smile. Slap. All of a sudden, with a gust of wind, a huge slap landed on the middle-aged man's face, sending him flying a few meters away. Several bloody teeth flew out, and with a dull thud, the middle-aged man's face swelled up as he crashed to the ground. "I'm a country bumpkin? I'm Mr. Tree?" Yi Xian stood up from the sofa with a calm expression. He slowly walked in front of the middle-aged man and stomped on his face with his wide feet. His feet were even more forceful. Dead silence. Everyone was stunned. Not only was the entire sales hall silent, but Xiechuchu and the other sales ladies were also stunned. It was as if their souls had left their bodies. "Security, security, he's hitting me. He's hitting me." The middle-aged man screamed like a pig being slaughtered. The security guards in front of the door quickly woke up and ran towards Yi Xian. "Get lost." A simple word caused the 2 security guards to stop in their tracks. It was only because Yi Xian's aura was extremely shocking that the 2 of them didn't dare to act rashly. It was as if a voice was telling the 2 security guards that if they dared to step forward, their fates would be tragic. Mr. Please don't do this." When the atmosphere was in a deadlock, Xiechuchu walked quickly to Yi Xian and begged with a choked voice. "Go and call your real boss here. I must buy this villa today." Yi Xian narrowed his eyes slightly and his voice was slightly gloomy. The middle-aged manager wanted to get up, but before he could, Yi Xian's voice was heard again. "Kneel down. Who allowed you to get up without my permission? Kid, you're fucking looking for death. Do you know whose company this is?" The middle-aged man struggled to get up and yelled at Yi Xian. But before he could finish, what happened next would be unforgettable for the middle-aged manager. Crack. Ah! Yi Xian raised his foot and stomped on the other party's knees. The sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. It made the middle-aged manager kneel on the spot. His miserable howl made one's scalp tingle. He turned around. Yi Xian sat on the sofa again. His expression was calm as if he had done something very casual. However, in the eyes of others, Yi Xian's methods were extremely vicious. Call the boss. Tell him that someone is causing trouble at Biyun Pavilion. The middle-aged manager yelled loudly. A saleslady's face turned pale and she quickly picked up the phone to make a call. The entire sales hall was extremely silent. Other than the middle-aged manager who was kneeling on the ground and groaning from time to time, the rest of the people looked at Yi Xian with obvious fear. In fact, Yi Xian didn't want to cause trouble. Since the villa he had his eyes on wasn't for sale, he planned to look elsewhere. However, the middle-aged manager was too presumptuous and didn't take Yi Xian seriously at all. Moreover, Xie Chuchu was respectful and spoke up for him from beginning to end. But she was scolded by the middle-aged manager. If Yi Xian didn't do anything, it wouldn't be like him. Time passed little by little. When the door of the sales hall was pushed open, several bodyguards in black cleared the way. A graceful figure entered the sales hall. When she saw the middle-aged manager kneeling on the ground, her delicate face immediately turned cold. "What's the matter?" Zhuo Junting said coldly. Zhuo Junting's appearance immediately made the middle-aged manager happy. Then he said with an aggrieved face, "Miss Zhuo, someone is causing trouble at Biyun Pavilion. You have to help me." After the middle-aged manager said this, 2 crocodile tears flowed down his face. Coupled with his swollen face, he indeed gave off an extremely miserable feeling. "It's her?" At this moment, Yi Xian, who was sitting on the sofa, had a playful look in his eyes. He didn't expect that the owner of Biyun Pavilion was the woman who bought his jade talisman. This made Yi Xian feel that the world was really small. Zhuo Junting was in a very bad mood. Not only was she in a bad mood, she was in an extremely bad mood. During this period of time, she had been constantly looking for Yi Xian's whereabouts, but she didn't find any clues. Today, someone was causing trouble at her company, which made her even more irritated. "Miss Zhuo, it's this person. He's the one who hurt me." Looking at Zhuo Junting's cold expression, the middle-aged manager quickly pointed at Yi Xian and said, "Sir, you hurt our company's employees for no reason. Don't you think you've gone too far?" Or, Zhuo Junting was about to angrily rebuke Yi Xian, but before she could finish her words, she saw Yi Xian's appearance and was stunned on the spot. Her angry words also stopped abruptly at this moment. "My jade talisman is still working, right?" Yi Xian said calmly. "Zizyu?" Zhuo Junting exclaimed. There was no trace of anger on her face. Instead, she walked excitedly towards Yi Xian. Such a scene directly stunned the middle-aged manager. He didn't recover for a long time. As long as he wasn't a fool, he could tell that his boss obviously knew this person. Seeing her extremely excited expression, the middle-aged manager also had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Master, I've finally found you." When she arrived in front of Yi Xian, Zhuo Junting was so excited that she couldn't speak. Her hands were at a loss and she was clearly nervous. "Why are you looking for me? That jade talisman is enough to solve your family's problem. Moreover, I'm not a master. You can call me Yi Xian." Yi Xian said calmly. Then I'll call you Mr. Yi. My grandfather has always wanted to thank you in person for saving his life. I wonder if you have time to visit my Zhuo family?" Zhuo Junting asked with anticipation in her eyes. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't reply to Zhuo Junting's invitation. This also made Zhuo Junting quickly come to her senses. She suddenly looked at the middle-aged manager kneeling on the ground. "Manager Su, what's going on?" Zhuo Junting's expression changed and she angrily rebuked the middle-aged manager. Looking at such a scene, how could the middle-aged manager not see the situation in front of him? This also made him dare not hide the slightest bit of the situation from before. After Zhuo Junting knew the whole story, her face suddenly turned cold. She said, "Who gave you the right to make a decision and reserve the house for that guy? Qi Shichen." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.